Good evening. Welcome to the April 9th, 2018 Troy City Council meeting. We are pleased this evening to have Pastor Simeon Timbuk from the Bethesda Romanian Pentecostal Church with us this evening to lead us in the invocation. So please stand for that and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we come before you tonight and we thank you for this day and for all the people who are present for this meeting. I ask you to bless the mayor, the council members, give them wisdom and discernment for all the issues that are in front of them to make the right decision for the city of Troy. Also bless the state of Michigan and the United States of America. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor. Troy City Council meeting is now called to order. The roll call, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Slater.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham.
Here.
Councilmember Baker.
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick.
Here.
Councilmember Pennington.
Here. All present. First order of business this evening is certificates of recognition and special presentations. We have one this evening, C1, on behalf of the City of Troy Employees Casual for Cause program for the months of January and February 2018. Community Affairs Director Cindy Stewart will make a presentation. Good evening, Cindy.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. It's my pleasure tonight to, where'd she go? We all love the Troy Nature Center, so it is our pleasure the employees chose the Troy Nature Society, and we have $591 for them.
Wow. Well, I want to say thank you to the employees of the City of Troy for donating the proceeds from their casual day to us. Thank you so much. And for those of you who don't know, the Troy Nature Society has a wonderful operating agreement with the City of Troy, and we manage the 100-acre preserve. So we hope that you'll come and walk the beautiful trails and enjoy some educational programs courtesy of the City of Troy. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. There are no carryover items this evening, so we will move to public hearings. There is one scheduled this evening. There is, E1 is a public hearing for the Tarbush Hookah Lounge license suspension hearing. I will open that public hearing. Call upon City Attorney Lori Grigg-Bloom for an introduction.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. And actually, I'm going to be turning it over in just a couple of minutes here to Assistant City Attorney Alan Motsney, who is going to give just a brief recitation of the facts. I would just indicate for the record that this is the first one that I'm aware of that you've had, and this is a hearing for a potential revocation. I would also just indicate that you have on your desks another alternative resolution. It's more like a probationary period in the event that council does not wish to revoke the license. We believe that it does provide some protections for the city. So that is on your desks as a yellow sheet. And with that, Mayor, unless council has any questions for me, I'd like to have Assistant City Attorney Alan Motsney present the facts.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Motsney.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. With me is Mr. Mike Mitchell. He represents the licensee.
Good evening.
Chapter 77 of the Troy City Code provides for smoking lounge licenses. The Tarbush Hookah Lounge, located at 4939 Rochester Road, has a smoking lounge license. Based on some reports of possible criminal activity, the Troy Police conducted an inspection on March 15th of 2018, and Sergeant Gobler, along with other Troy Police officers, found evidence of various violations. The first violation was that an individual by the name of Mr. Al-Khatib I won't pronounce his whole name, but that was his last name, was holding himself out as the manager of the smoking lounge. The problem with that is that under the ordinance, only a person registered as a manager on the license can serve as a manager, and a registered manager must be present. There was no registered manager present. Additionally, the police found evidence that alcohol was on the premises, and Mr. Al-Khatib admitted that alcohol had been consumed on the premises by the employees. This is also a violation of Chapter 77. On March 18th, Sergeant Gobler went back to the premises at 1:40 a.m. and saw evidence that patrons were at the premises. The problem is the ordinance prohibits patrons from occupying or being present at a smoking lounge after 12 midnight, and this was 1:40 a.m. Likewise, upon further investigation, Sergeant Gobler determined there was no registered manager present. So there's 4 violations. As a result of those violations, the city manager issued a suspension of the license on March 21st. Under Chapter 77, if somebody asks for a due process hearing to challenge the suspension, that hearing is held before City Council. In this case, the licensee did ask for that due process hearing. We did bring Sergeant Gobler here. He's present to testify if necessary. However, it's my understanding that Mr. Mitchell will be admitting responsibility to the 4 violations on behalf of his client and make an argument for something other than a revocation. I would indicate that if the City Council confirms the violations occurred, which you can do if there's an admission, City Council can revoke the license, they could confirm the suspension and issue a lengthier suspension, or City Council may elect to reinstate the license. And if you have any questions for me, I will ask them. Otherwise, I believe Mr. Mitchell would like to make a presentation on behalf of his client.
If I may, just for a few moments.
Could you use the microphone, please?
Absolutely. On behalf of the Tarbouche Hookah Lounge, we're asking that the city set aside the suspension and adopt the alternate resolution that's been presented to council. These are the first violations for my client. Since these allegations were levied, my client's business has been shut down since March the 21st. We're going on 18 days. Although there remains no source of income for my client, she's still obligated to pay her business expenses. This has certainly been a trying time for my clients, but additionally, not only have they not been able to make any money, my client is facing criminal charges. It's my understanding that Ms. Hamame and her husband, Mr. Al-Khatib, will be charged with misdemeanors. It's my understanding that the warrants were sought earlier today. They're each facing up to 90 days in jail, up to 2 years probation, and a minimum of up to $500 in fines. We're asking why should they be given consideration? Well, I've had a lot of time to discuss these matters with my clients, and they understand that there's a lot at stake here. They can't even run their business for these allegations. What we're asking and what we're presenting to the council is that there is a plan of action here. As of recently, Mr. Sakir Pancha Bahaya, who has already submitted an application to become a manager of the Tarbouche Hookah Lounge, he has been approved. He would like to move in, and my client would like to bring him in as a manager of the business. But not only that, he also would like to eventually obtain an ownership stake in the business. So there is a lot at stake here. People have skin in the game. And if these violations are committed again, the city has the option of shutting them down. And that is what the alternate resolution outlines. We will make sure that one of the 3 managers, Mr. Sakir Pancha Bahaya, is there, or Hamze Hamame, who's also an approved manager, is the brother of my client, and my client, Ms. Hamame. I had a frank discussion with them about the alcohol. There will be no more alcohol served on the premise. It doesn't matter if it's used for personal consumption. They certainly can't use it for business purposes, but That will be no more, and they will strictly adhere to the hours. It's clearly stated by the city that between the hours of 12 a.m. and 8 a.m. that they can't be open, and they will not. What rights does the city have? The city's got the right of reentry under Chapter 77, paragraph 16. The mere filing of the application gives the city the right to send any of its department members in there to do any sort of cursory inspection to make sure that things are in order. I think that with this proposed change in management, that there will be no further violations, and I think that the criminal charges that are being levied are just punishments in and of themselves for these allegations. And for those reasons, we're respectfully asking the council to adopt the alternate resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from council for Mr. Motzni or the attorney? Councilman Hamilton.
So the person who is acting as manager, has he been let go?
He will have no activity, no involvement whatsoever with this business.
Thank you.
Councilman Henderson.
Are the Hamamis not here tonight?
They are not here.
They're not here. Okay. The problem that I have with the whole scenario is the ordinance that we wrote 5 years ago now was very strict. We went through a lot of hoops to try to make something palatable for everybody, and also restrictive because of the way that these things came to Troy to begin with. There was a lot of disruptive behavior by all hookah lounges. And then fast forward 5 years, they completely seemed to disregard a lot of the rules. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for, oops, we're losing our income here. So I would like to see them here. I don't know if that's possible, but it would be good to have them as good neighbors present themselves to a city council.
We would be happy, and as I talked with the city attorney, to do whatever it is that the city wants to make this alternate resolution a doable solution. If it's the council's desire to have them here, I'll bring them here. But the other thing that I have to be aware of is these criminal charges that are pending. And as a practicing attorney, I have to do everything I can to protect my clients from those charges. But again, they are facing jail time, they're facing probation, they're facing fines, they're facing costs. We're merely asking for a second chance for them to do this the right way, and I think with the new members' involvement that it will do that.
Just to follow up, with liquor license violations, which is kind of along the same lines, generally speaking, the principals, the owners are always here to at least look us eye to eye and discuss what their plan forward is. But we appreciate your presence, but...
Thank you.
Councilman Baker.
How long have they been in business?
The business has been there for a few years. My clients have had it, I want to say, about a year. And it was, I think, January of 2018. Or wait, yes, so just recently.
January of 2018?
I want to say that was the date, but I'm not 110% sure.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Mayor, I can answer that. It's been a little less than a year. It's been about 7 months, I believe.
Councilwoman Hoderick.
The gentleman being brought in to supposedly make sure this never happens again, this manager, what are the credentials that he brings?
It's something that he's had an ongoing discussion with the owners about for some time. It's an interest of his, and he thinks he can bring some ideas to the table to help make that business more profitable.
To Councilman Henderson's point, we had very difficult discussions here, but very pointed and pretty unequivocal about limiting even the times that these hookah lounges can be open, and there was good reason for that. We had crime happening. We had establishments near, one of them dealing with cleaning up things in the parking lot the next day. This is a community that really prides itself on the safety of its citizenry, its business owners. So reading this over, this is just such a mismatch with who we are as a community and what we stand for. So you see us giving you the side eye because this isn't our first go-around with dealing with issues at an establishment like this. So I'm very concerned, and I'm one who likes to give second chances, but this is very, very, very troubling to me to have read this.
But that is all, again, all we're asking for is that second chance.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham.
Thank you, Mayor. There are 2 violations on the 15th of March, and then 3 days later, there were another 2 violations noted. At what time or at what point did the owners become aware of these violations?
It had to have been on the, I can't speak for them, but I'm going to guess on when they occurred, when the police had arrived on March 15th.
If I may follow up.
Sure.
The problem I have with giving a second chance is if the owners were aware of this on the 15th or maybe the next day, given that it was late in the morning, there were no corrective actions taken in the next 2 days to ensure that things didn't happen. So I have a really hard time giving a second chance. I like to give second chances, but second chances need to be earned. And I'm not sure that enough corrective actions or a plan was put in place, or at least a level of seriousness about the charges were put in place right afterwards. I think I can sympathize with the loss of income, but the statute's very clear on what the expectations are. So I understand you need to do what you need to do to represent your client, but I don't think there's any ambiguity in what the statute required. So I'm struggling with this one and the second chance, to be very candid.
Well, I would note that I believe that Mr. Secure Panchayaya, his application was submitted on March the 16th, which is obviously after the first set of allegations. But the idea was for him to come on board, change some things, bring some organization, making sure that there's always a manager on the premises at all times, because that's what they're required to do.
Sure.
Bringing in someone new, another unknown quantity, to me, I'm not sure that that's sufficient.
He did pass the approval process, so he has already been approved by the city.
Questions from Council? Councilman Baker.
Question for Mr. Motzney or the city attorney. If we revoke this license, do they have any appeal rights or any alternative remedies?
There's nothing in the ordinance providing for an alternative remedy. The general rules in the circuit court allow for appeals, what they call administrative appeals, so it's possible a circuit court appeal could be filed. Also, I wish to respond to another question. The owners for sure were notified of the suspension on March 21st when the notice of suspension was issued. Whether Mr. Al-Kahib himself told the owners about the violations of the 15th, that we don't know the answer to that, but the owners for sure would have known by March 21st.
A couple questions for the attorney, please. You said that you are speaking for your clients, or you're not speaking for your clients. You said once you were and once you weren't. To be here today, to even consider this alternate resolution, we have to be assured and persuaded that the events happened. And I assume you're standing here today admitting guilt.
We are. I am. On behalf of the Tarbush Hookah Lounge.
I'm with Councilman Henderson. It bothers me that the owners aren't here. I think this is very serious, and I think the owners should be here in front of this council. I think you might have a better chance with this council if you bring them here to face the council. At least I'm hearing a little bit of that. So I'm in favor of tabling this until the next council meeting and bringing them forward so we can talk to them and get some assurances from them. don't know if I have any support for that or not, or if you want to take care of this evening.
I'd support that.
Moved by the chair, supported by Councilman Pennington, that we postpone this item until the next council meeting and to bring the owners to the council meeting and face the council. Any further discussion on that? Councilman Hamilton?
I think that's fair. I mean, quite frankly, I was thinking revoking the license, but I'm willing to hear them out. Next meeting's 2 weeks, right? So.
Correct.
Okay. I support you.
Councilman Pennington?
And until then, they're suspended from doing business, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Councilman Henderson?
I just have one question. It showed up in the agenda item that the reason that we went in there to begin with was suspicion of alcohol and, in quotes, weed. And, you know, I have a kind of a low tolerance with marijuana to begin with, and I know what hookahs are capable of. Was there any follow-up with that aspect of that, or was it just strictly alcohol that we were dealing with when we went in?
They investigated and looked for marijuana, and none was found on the premises, and nobody admitted to marijuana use in the premises. But they were looking for it, but they did, as I've indicated, find the alcohol.
Do you have any problem postponing this for 2 weeks and bringing your clients in front of the
I'm
council?
still in the game. I don't see how I can object.
The vote, Ms. Dixon?
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Motion passes. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Just
City Attorney Bloom.
just a question on this. The police officers who are present, do you want them to appear in 2 weeks, or is that with the admission of these violations, do they need to appear?
I think the admission's on record.
It is.
I think we can excuse the officers then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next on the agenda is public comment for items on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses. I see that we have several residents and businesses that wish to speak on items this evening. So please review the public comments section in your agenda packet, because we will be following those regulations closely. For those of you that haven't been before this council before, you get 3 minutes to speak to the council. The green light will come on when your 3 minutes starts. The yellow light comes on when you have 1 minute to go. Please start to wrap up your comments when the yellow light comes on, and once the red light comes on, that will conclude your time to speak this evening. First, I will call on Curtis Smith, Troy resident, who wishes to speak on I-6. Good evening.
Good evening, Council. My name is Kurt Smith. I have been a Troy resident for over 25 years and the head tennis pro at the Troy Racquet Club for 37 years. Don Pierce, a successful attorney and an avid tennis player, had a vision over 40 years ago to put tennis, bubble up a tennis club in Troy's prime location. Since that time, both city and the club has changed and grown and evolved. We have become wonderful, diverse, expanded our programs, and brought tennis as a lifetime sport to many. We have been instrumental in the success of our high school tennis teams, USTA teams, and our many leagues. We have classes for every age and ability. Tom Schoen is also a successful businessman and an avid tennis player. More importantly, Tom has the leadership qualities and character to continue the vision that Don created. Leadership of the Troy Racquet Club under Brian DiVirgilio would prove to be detrimental to the future success of this club and would have a negative effect on the community as a whole. Here are a few examples. About 8 years ago, Brian was hired as a teaching pro at our Troy Racquet Club. One afternoon, Brian and I met for lunch at Mr. B's to discuss some concerns. At the end of our discussion, he got about several inches from my face and said, "I like chaos. Chaos is good." My stunned response was, "Really? Really?" And I walked out. As I reflect on the incident today, my response is still, really? Do we really need more chaos in the world? A few weeks later, on a very busy Saturday afternoon, the lobby of the Troy Racquet Club, in which was packed with kids, parents, staff, everyone coming in and off the courts, when there was a stunned silence as Brian was screaming at our young desk person, Megan. Megan was reduced to tears as he berated her over a very minor scheduling error. It became obvious to many of us why he had a long list of short employment at too many clubs to mention. He treated business associates in the similar fashion. Tim Mulvihill is, for the lack of a better word, a bubble putter-upper and has been putting up our Troy Racquet Club bubble for over 20 years. It's a skill few others besides Tim and his team have. When Brian opened his tennis facility in Pontiac, the best person to call was Tim. Due to unforeseen obstacles, Tim was unable to meet Brian's timeline. But to my knowledge, Tim has still not been paid over $15,000 even after putting up the bubble 3 years ago. In closing, the issues we have with Brian are integrity, credibility, and character, as well as stability. I know this is a lot of money. After all, this is a business. However, one cannot fake or buy integrity. There is no price tag on good character. Fancy presentations.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you. Your 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's the first and last time that we'll allow applause. Please read the rules and regulations in the agenda packet. There's no clapping in the City Council chambers. Thank you. Next, I'll call on Tom Schoen, Troy resident, who wishes to speak on I-6.
Ready? Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Good evening. My name is Tom Schoen. I'm a long-term Troy resident, member of the Troy Racquet Club, and I represent the TRC bid. When this RFP came out, I received calls from both Brian at Alcourt and Don Pierce from TRC. Based on character, reputation, and a track record of the service to the City of Troy, I chose to partner with Don Pierce. We're not here to complain about the recommendation. We're here to request the Council or Committee do further due diligence before awarding this thing. There are two main areas, people and the city. Let's talk about people first. There was an enormous level of shock, tears, and dismay when we learned of the Selection Committee's recommendation. You have to ask yourself why. The all-court tennis proposal included options: 1, if employees stay; 2, if they do not. That was well said, and it had to be said because they know there are numerous employees and pros that are going to flat out refuse to work with the principals of all-court. Again, you've got to ask yourself why. The current recommendation is to award the contract to someone who was fired / let go from the Troy Racquet Club 3-4 years ago. My understanding that these services were terminated because there were combative and adversarial issues between Brian and numerous employees and pros. You rarely let somebody go that's doing too good of a job. You'll hear from just a couple people tonight, but trust me, it is the tip of the iceberg, and it is the vast majority of the TRC community. There are a lot of concerned people. Let's talk about the city briefly. All-court submitted an excellent written proposal, and I assume they gave a great interview. Anybody can look good on paper. TRC has provided the city with reliable, consistent services over the past 40 years. Neither TRC, any of their lawyers, colleagues, or associates have ever brought a legal claim that actually involves the city. If you dig a little deeper into All-Court, Wesson, or their principals, you'll find they have a history of lawsuits, terminations, altercations, and city violations that just are not there with TRC. In today's environment, in the state of Michigan and the city of Troy, the last thing we need is a litigious operator or litigious situation. Professional references, as Kurt highlighted, our pros have served the city for 20, 30, 37 years. All-Court has 5 to 6 clubs listed in the last 5 years. It's like an employment interview. Again, you have to ask yourself why. Stakeholders. If the council were to ask key stakeholders who they want to manage the tennis facility, they would find an enormous percentage of stakeholders would prefer TRC to Alcourt. Again, please ask yourself why. If this contract was awarded to one of the other operators in town, I don't believe we'd be here tonight. In closing, I respectfully request that the City Council postpone this decision until either they or the selection committee can more thoroughly vet the principals that have submitted these proposals and make a well-informed decision. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on John Mayernick, Troy resident who wishes to speak on H1. Good evening.
Yes, my name is John Mayernick. I live in Troy for about 25 years now. I have two sons, both at Troy High, and I live over by the White Barn Church on Livernois. Thank you very much for listening to me. This is about the city manager and about that report that everybody's been talking about in the paper. In a sense, we're all in this together. We're all just, every one of us is a citizen here. We're all neighbors. We all need to know what's going on with our city government, local, state, whatever it is. I'm no different than you. You're no different than me. We just elect you to do kind of our job. But really, we're all in it together. This is all of our information. So I'd like that to be released. Redacted? Sure. I get it. We have an issue. You have an issue. I have an issue. You have an issue. And if there's a document that has some information about an employee with substantial power and influence over the city who is maybe potentially abusing that power, it seems to me necessary that I need to know, and everyone here needs to know, what is going on? It's my money. As I understand it, the man made $215,000, two and a half times than the average Troy citizen. 215 houses, pick any subdivision, $1,000 of their taxes went to pay for that man's salary. And I don't know what he did wrong. Maybe he didn't. But I'd like to know. I'm proposing a radical idea. I'm proposing that we get rid of the city manager idea altogether and go with a mayor who is in charge of the finances. We've had now 2 city managers in a row who have failed us, and in cases failed us miserably. Troy has been afflicted with not so good mayors, or I apologize, city managers back to back. Bad handwriting. They either quit or fired for scandalous reasons. It seems like we can't find a good, honest one. And I think there are 4 reasons, potentially. Either the council has a very poor judgment of character, which I hope that's not the case. 2 is possible very, very bad luck. Manipulative people can really persuade you, and then they turn into something else. Or it's perhaps that the office itself is corrupting of people. That the power and the money is too great and too much for a city with tens of millions of dollars in a large area for one person to be in control over, who has no accountability to the people, who is not voted by the people. I can't even vote a no confidence or a yes confidence on the person. Nothing. I ask you guys to do all that. And then if there is some impropriety going on, it's perhaps buried in a report. I don't like that. It's also possible that corrupted people just seek the position because it's so much fun. How long must the city of Troy...
Mr. Mayernick?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, I'll call on Howard Trado, Troy resident, wishes to speak on I-6. Good evening.
Good afternoon. I'm a Troy resident. Good evening. I'm a Troy resident since 1987. I'm a member of the Troy Racquet Club. First, I ask that everyone who was here supporting the Troy Racquet Club please rise. Thank you. Next, there's a great deal of support for the Troy Racquet Club among its members, whether they are Troy residents or non-residents. I speak for all of them here who support the family atmosphere, the pros there, and the community atmosphere. As a member of this group, I am concerned about the proposed award of this contract to All Court Tennis, its investors and owners. I question whether there has been due diligence performed by the committee that made this recommendation. Have they talked to people? The references listed. Have they looked at the questionnaire, paragraph subsection 9, and all the references listed? If they are such a good management team with all their different entities, why aren't they still in all these other facilities? Why have they been let go or moved on to Wesson? Did anybody check with the Bloomfield Racquet Club, formerly Square Lake, as to what happened there? Has anybody checked with the Michigan Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs and looked for the different entities and followed up with different lawsuits that's going on? It's all a public record, and I don't believe your committee did a good job. It's a disservice to the Troy Racquet Club and to this community to not do that. Ask them. Has anybody questioned how, if Wesson is so successful with on their forms that there's $1 million in revenue, which boggles my mind. Have you guys seen their records or their books about that? It's easy to say, but let's back it up to see how successful they are. What about the new dome they're putting up? They're saying that we won't have it ready. We're going to take people from Troy and put them in lessons and court time over at Wesson. Well, if Wesson's doing so good, how do you do that? You can't do it. There's a lot of inconsistencies here, and this committee did not do its job. From what I see, they have privatization issues with all these 8 courts. They're going to privatize 5 of them, and the other ones keep outdoors during the summer. Well, there's a shortage of tennis courts in Troy. What about that? We don't have that problem with the current situation. Finally, I'm asking you to table this recommendation and take it back and ask the vetting committee what they did. And have they done any of this? Have they talked to references? Did they even talk to Don Pierce? No. And if they have done some of this or all of it, good, okay, I can live with it. But if not, it's shame on you and shame on this committee, and it's going to hurt our community. So please table it.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Don Pierce, Troy business owner, to speak on I-6. Don Pierce. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm not sure what I'm in the middle of. We have a passionate group of tennis people on all sides of this aisle. So I have to start out with a thank you, first of all, because I've had this business for a long time. I can remember walking up this aisle 35 or 40 years ago, and we've been through some extensions of the lease, which are basically copied from the original as it's been refined a little bit, and the business is very much the same as it was. I find it difficult to chastise anybody in particular who has worked at the club or has supported what we've done over the years. A couple of things that I do want to mention, though, came about because of the end of lease. Obviously, there was a confrontation that I had to have with the end of the lease. What's going to happen? We've been cognizant of the fact something was going to happen in terms of procedure. I have no problem with the procedure that was undertaken. I think it was done in all good effort by the people involved. I did look at the bids as they were submitted at the very last minute, both by us and by the other party that submitted. I looked at the backgrounds, and I was surprised to find that a lot of my employees were listed as part of the other group. I've since that time run that down a little bit and just found that those aren't really completed statements. They're just examples of what might happen. I found that a little bit tough to compete with myself in that respect, because a lot of what we built up was aimed at continuity, stability, involvement of all the members of the community, and we feel we are a big part of it, and that's part of what I enjoy when I go over to the Troy Racquet Club. In fact, the other bid showed being part of Troy Racquet Club, which actually there's only one Troy Racquet Club. That's our group. We own that name. But my only thought would be to echo the sentiment of the prior speaker, and that is, if more due diligence work can be done, maybe it's worthwhile. I don't know. I don't make all the commentary because I don't know it all myself. I spend enough time trying to run this down, but this was a fairly intense procedure to get a good bid together, as our opponent and we both did. So that's why I'm here, is basically to say let's make sure we do a good job. We've obviously got a lot at stake. The community has a lot at stake. Tennis is going to be a successful sport here, and we're going to support it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Next, I'll call on Jeff Hudson, Troy business owner who wishes to speak on I-6. Thank you. Cynthia Goulis, Troy resident, wishes to speak on I-6.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Cynthia Gullis. I have been a Troy resident for 34 years, a member of the Troy Racquet Club for about 20, and an employee of the club since 2011. I was working at the club part-time as a desk supervisor for the last few years that Mr. DiVirgilio was head pro there. During that time, he created an atmosphere that was unpleasant and stressful for both employees and members. I have witnessed at least one woman member running off the court in tears because of something he said to her. She canceled her membership shortly after. As a result of this recommendation, I've talked with many longtime members who have said they will not return to the club if this recommendation passes. I, for one, will not work for All Court Tennis, nor will be a member there. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Gene Stein, Troy resident, wishes to speak on H1.
Good evening, Mayor Slater and members of City Council.
Good evening.
My name is Gene Stein. I live at 1915 Boland. I've been there for 56 years. Short time. But first, I want to thank Councilman Hamilton for reminding the council of the need for transparency. The public has the right to know of managerial transgressions. If a suit is filed against the city for defamation of character, it holds no water as long as the truth is told. Truth is always the best defense. Sunshine is a good disinfectant. The facts are the facts, and I trust that you will vote accordingly.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Aaron Green, Troy resident, wishes to speak on H1. Good evening.
Good evening. I suspect you all know why I'm here. I'm here to request that you reveal the report. Last time, it was a little bit rushed, and you wanted to make sure that you did due diligence to make sure that you were protecting the city from undue litigation. As the former mayor has said, the best defense is the truth. And last time, one of the points that was brought up was making sure that those who came forward, that their statements, that their privacy was protected, that they were kept safe because they were not made party to the revealing of any information, and they don't really have the ability to say yes or no. I would say that the best thing that you could do to protect them and others in this city in the future, both within the city and at large, because you are a role model, you act as the city, you are showing the way by the way that you act, would be to reveal this, to ensure that anything that did happen is opened up and dealt with if there's anything to deal with, and to make clear that the city will not tolerate this. Previous actions aside, that this sort of behavior will not be tolerated, and that you recognize that openness is the best policy and the best way to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So again, please vote your consciences and reveal this. Let the public know that this city is a safe place for people to work, regardless of their background, regardless of their gender, regardless of their age or the amount of power they may or may not wield, that everybody has a right to a safe workplace, and that you believe in that. And revealing that report, I think, will show that. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Dory Goldenberger, Troy resident, wishes to speak on J4B. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Dory Goldberger. I reside on Black Pine Trail Drive, directly adjacent to Beach Park. I am quite happy and support the addition of facilities to the park. However, there is a proposal to put the facilities in or near the rain garden at the south side of the parking structure there. I have some concerns with that I have taken to Mr. Bovenseat and look forward to working with him in the future. But I did want to bring those to you as well. I have some concerns that the construction may impact the drainage that will affect the properties directly adjacent to the park in that location. That the location serve the public interest and for usage of the park, and that it may affect the quiet enjoyment of the adjacent properties in that currently proposed location. I believe Mr. Bovenseat is going to work with me well in doing due diligence to see if perhaps the north side of the park that does not flood and is on high ground may be a better location. And it is also adjacent to the wooded area next door that is currently being used for those facilities by a great many people. So again, look forward to having those facilities in the park, but hoping that we can all work together to perhaps put them in a place that has the best interests of the park and the neighborhoods adjacent to it in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call upon Toby Goslin, Troy resident, wishes to speak on H1. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm happy to be here. It's been a while. I'm Toby Goslin, and yes, I'm a Troy resident. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight before this council and hold you accountable. I support the release of the sealed document tonight. While I commend your unanimous vote to fire Mr. Kishnick with cause, the truth prevails. He was a repeat offender with an abusive history, sheltered by a majority vote on your watch. It was the 911 call to the Clawson Police, not council, that stopped the train wreck that ended badly for so many on his path to self-destruction. Perhaps the 4 members of council who enabled his behavior will step up and agree, enough is enough. I can't read your mind, but I assume you believe the best action at the time was to seal the detailed report for further review. This story is part of a more serious conversation. Enabling abusers who manage to fly below the radar with no limits or consequences will haunt your career and scar your good name. Troy voters elected you to represent with good judgment, moral character, and ethics. Be a difference maker. Be a part of the solution moving forward. Establish a strict non-fraternization policy with enforcement. Please release the sealed document. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Beth Sigerland, Troy resident, wishes to speak on I-6. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Slater and all the members of the council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. The Troy Racquet Club and its staff has provided a warm, friendly, and inviting tennis facility for over 40 years to the city of Troy, and also welcome those outside of our city with open arms. I'm here tonight on behalf of many of the players of the Troy Racquet Club to say that there's a lot of concern over what will happen if a new management company takes over our club. I ask you to slow down this process, dig deeper, and please look at the facts. Please also take into consideration the long-standing history of this wonderful facility and its outstanding staff. I also urge you to consider what this could mean to our small but very tight Troy Racquet Club family. I understand that money plays a factor in the bid process, but we believe that an outstanding reputation and commitment to the community of Troy should count for even more. Appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Carolina Noguis, Troy resident, wishes to speak on H1. Hopefully I didn't butcher your name too bad.
It's okay. Hi, good evening, Council. I am here tonight as a concerned citizen in solidarity with the young woman and other city employees who, through no fault of their own, were subject to an allegedly toxic work environment at the hands of the former city manager. At the March 19th City Council meeting, a young woman bravely came forward to shine light on workplace harassment allegations, which had previously fallen on deaf ears. As a young woman who was also starting my professional career, I knew that I could not remain silent on this topic. It is troubling that city employees hated coming to work, and it is devastating that an employee felt that she had to leave due to an unbearable toxic culture. I would like for city leaders and residents to reflect on why the former city manager was allowed to stay when such troubling allegations were known by many. Times have changed, and it is long overdue for women's voices to be heard. We hear the term transparency get thrown around a lot, and I am certain that young people and many residents care about it. I urge you to please take the work of transparency and dignity seriously and help guide us all as one Troy community into a path free from toxic work environments and hidden agendas. Please help set an example for us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Michelle Pallas, Troy resident, wishes to speak on H1. Good evening.
Mayor Slater, on March 13th, I wrote you a letter. I urged you to act swiftly to address the toxic culture that enabled a person like the former city manager not only to survive, but to thrive in this culture. Tonight, you have the chance to lead, to show us your leadership. In the work I do as a change and leadership coach, I see abusive managers who get away with autocratic maneuvers designed to instill fear and hopelessness in the hearts of workers. Speaking out about ethical concerns are punished. Some leave because they can, but most return each day to an unpleasant and stressful work environment. I'm here to talk to the four men on this council who have protected the former city manager for years. I'm telling you this to help you have clear eyes about your vote today. The women who have worked under the direction of the former city manager are our friends, our sisters, our nieces. They are our mothers. They are our daughters. These women will never have the opportunity to advance their careers because they are not part of the club. They will work twice as hard as others just so the public is served. But they'll never be invited to play golf. They will keep their mouths shut just so they can keep their jobs. They will work hard for a promotion they'll never get. This is not a problem that is fixed by one event. Firing the city manager will not make this go away. Swift and public action is needed to show that you are taking responsibility and you are committed to change. This means creating a workplace where there are consequences for unacceptable behavior. Only deliberate leadership will begin the healing process. And it starts by holding yourselves accountable for giving license to a man to create a predator work environment. This is a crisis. It takes years to change workplace culture. You can choose to support dark secrets, or you can be the catalyst for change. Do you want to be leaders? Or do you want to pretend this will go away? I get it. I see You're scared of people finding out the truth. I see the fear on your faces. Gentlemen, as elected officials, your personal self-interest does not supersede my right as a citizen to live in a city free of personnel and financial abuses. I believe releasing the report is the first step in restoring trust in this council. Time's up.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Kim Moon, Troy resident, wishes to speak on H1. Good evening.
The state of Michigan has often been rated as having some of the worst government transparency in the nation. And we are seeing yet another example of this in this council's continual refusal to release the contents of the 2016 report on the numerous wrongdoings of ex-city manager Brian Kishnick. This story is not going away. Mr. Kishnick is still showing up in the Troy papers and in the Freep just recently. Even though a judge forbid him from contacting the woman he assaulted, apparently he feels the rules don't apply to him, and he contacted her anyway, and now he has to face consequences. The continuous cover-up of this report seems to me to be a case of men covering up for other men, or another man who thinks he has the right to abuse women. Some of you have further political ambitions, and if this taxpayer-funded report continues to be hidden away from the public, this issue will continue to be brought up and associated with you until that report sees the light of day. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Sue Matthews, Troy resident, who wishes to speak on H1. Good evening.
As an educator, I usually review a lot of the details, but most of them have been reviewed tonight already, so I don't need to go into that. What I will say, and what we do know for sure, is that some of you protected Brian Kishnick and gave him the cover that allowed him to continue his abuse of power. What we don't know is why you failed us then, and why some of you are still not willing to provide transparency. We have heard your reasons for explaining this. You were afraid to trigger litigation. It happened anyway. We already lost a FOIA case, cost us a lot of money. You were afraid of negative attention. That has continued since this whole thing came to light, and I assume will continue on. You were reluctant to break attorney-client privilege. The latest article in the Free Press indicates that that already happened, that Kishnick himself had a copy of this report that was supposedly protected and not meant to be in his hands, and he used that as a tool of abuse as well, intimidation. Ironically, you said you wanted to protect the employees from further exposure and abuse. Instead, your inaction provided a more hostile work environment to continue. Some of you said that once he was fired, that this would all just go away, and so it was a moot point to release it. I would counter that that's not true. It's not until you allow transparency that this is going to go away. Your being willing to fix it now is the right choice. After all, several of you have downplayed what's in that report. You've told us that it didn't rise to the level of further consequence, that it was mainly just personnel issues. Prove that. Otherwise, you're calling your integrity into question, because people who have nothing to hide will hide nothing. We count on your integrity when we vote you into these seats. If you don't have that integrity, then you don't deserve to be sitting there or in any other seat. Show us what your definition of not bad enough is, so then we can evaluate the judgment that you used to sit here. Some of you have always stood with the employees. Councilwoman Abraham, Councilwoman Hoderick, Jim Campbell before you, David Hamilton stands there now with you. I know it's not an easy stance. Your bravery has been noticed. It is commendable. We will not forget what you tried to do. The rest of you have the power tonight to end this and truly begin the process of healing the wounds that Mr. Kishnick caused. I hope you choose to use your power wisely. We're watching. We will hold you accountable for your words and actions in the past, tonight, and into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on John Coolish, Troy resident, wishes to speak on H1.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Last time I spoke before this council, I stated that integrity is like art. It takes practice over years to develop the skill, and it can be lost in a moment. Since that time, this council has heard from former Troy City employee Maggie Hughes, who spoke about the environment in this building under Brian Kishnick. The environment created by Mr. Kishnick was so toxic that Ms. Hughes resigned rather than to continue to work here. Mr. Pennington, you responded to Ms. Hughes by apologizing for your ignorance. You complained that being on council is hard. Well, sir, if having the integrity to do this job well is too hard, there's the door. Mr. Henderson, you characterized Ms. Hughes' statements as hearsay and pled ignorance. How very convenient. I suggest you put that on your campaign literature next year when you run for mayor. Dave Henderson, ignorant of what's happening in City Hall. Just make sure you never use the word integrity. Mr. Baker, you told Ms. Hughes that almost everything she said that day was news to you. But in 2016, you assured us all that you were watching Mr. Kishnick. So were your statements in 2016 just another breakable campaign promise? Not a surprise. And Mr. Slater, at no point in your response to Ms. Hughes did the words, "I apologize," escape your lips. You were more worried about your public perception and being sued. Remind me, where does the oath of office for mayor obviate the need for you to apologize? Let me introduce you to the words of philosopher Albert Camus. Integrity has no need of rules. I would add a caveat. Integrity also has no need for excuses, evasions, or weak apologies. I believe integrity is an action. It's something you have to do before you can claim the accolade. I suggest you act with integrity finally and release the report. Thank you.
Next, I'll call on David Ashland, Troy resident, wishes to speak on each one.
I'm David Ashland, a Troy resident. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Much of what I'm going to say is going to be repetitive, but I think we need to repeat at this time. In August of 2016, I spoke out on the proposal to waive the attorney-client privilege on the Brian Kishnick report. I focused then on government transparency as the basic reason to release the report. Transparency depends on openness, accountability, and honesty. And transparency is government's obligation to share information with citizens. In August of 2016, I stated that and this is a quote, in not opening the document to public visibility, and perhaps therefore not addressing other possible issues raised by the document, employees will feel their openness, honesty, and courage has been ignored. End of quote. As a result of not releasing the report, further abuse has been forced on staff, and they have been ignored. The toxic environment brought by Brian Kishnick to city administration and forced on city employees has been clearly exposed. Again, in August 2016, I thought of other possible reasons why there were 4 no votes to release the document. Today, April 2018, I believe the last of these 4 is likely the key reason some chose not to release the report. Let me again read from my statement of August 2016, quote, "Some might believe the report reveals information that might reflect negatively on some individuals involved in city government or negatively on some governing groups in city government. Perhaps careers, even political careers, could be impacted negatively. I don't know if this is the case, but opening the report to the public would address this possible reason. Today, April 2018. 1 year and 8 months later. 1 year and 8 months later. I think this reason even more strongly causes the ongoing reluctance to release the report. But today we need integrity, openness, accountability, and honesty. We need government transparency. Please release the 2016 report to all citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Tacey Cass, Troy resident, wishes to speak on H1.
Hi, my name is Cass Tacey. I'm a Troy resident. I'm here to address the lack of transparency in the Troy government. I have worked in the corporate world for 37 years, and at least for the last 10 years, a hostile work environment and sexual harassment have been considered very serious breaches. Most corporations have rules about supervisors dating subordinates. One of them has to quit or move to a different department. When I heard Ms. Hughes talk, when you guys had the meeting where you let him go, when I heard her talk about the toxic work environment, I have to believe that there were reportings of these incidences at the Human Resource Department in Troy. You are the board that oversees the Troy government. You do the work of the people. Did you look into any of these allegations? I've never been involved in Troy government, but I'm going to I go swimming every day, and I hear people talking about him dating his secretary there. So if you guys didn't know, what pile of sand did you put your head in? The next thing is, with this woman, Ms. Hughes, coming forward, did you guys ever, before this happened, go to the HR department to review his files, to see if there were allegations of him creating a toxic workplace? Because it seems hard to believe that you never heard these things when I hear about them at the swimming club. So I would recommend that you guys start taking this job seriously, that you should be protecting employees instead of the wrongdoers, and that if there isn't a policy about people dating their subordinates, you need to make one immediately, post haste, because it does cause a hostile work environment. It causes favoritism, and it causes a lack of integrity on all parts. You guys got trapped in this by denying and by hiding. It's time to untrap yourself. It's time to let yourself loose and to get out of this and release the report.
Thank you. That concludes those that have signed up to speak this evening on items on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses. Did I miss anybody? Okay. Next on the agenda, well, this is an opportunity for City Council or City Administration to respond to public comment. I know both of these are on the agenda. Did anyone wish to speak before they're brought up? Councilman Baker?
I actually just have a question for the City Attorney, but I do want to let everybody know who's not familiar with our meetings, we will be discussing these issues at length when the agenda item comes before us. So if just because we're not talking to you now about it, doesn't mean we're not going to in a few minutes, just so you know that. That's later on the agenda. For the City Attorney, I just want to clarify, is there currently a policy in the City of Troy against dating a subordinate?
No.
There's not, correct? Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Harrison?
I have a question also for the City Attorney and the report that Brian had possession of. Since he was the subject of the report, was he not allowed to have that report?
No, he was entitled to have it. He would have been required to keep it confidential. But I would also just indicate that it's council that holds the power, not an individual. So it's council that is the only one that's able to relinquish the attorney-client privilege, not inadvertent actions.
Any comments by council on response? As indicated, both of these items are going to be discussed. One of them is going to be discussed right now. H1 is a council referral submitted by Councilman Hamilton. I will defer to Councilman Hamilton.
I'd like to move H1. Whereas on June 9th, 2016, Troy City Council was informed that a city employee raised concerns about some expenditures that were made during the preceding months by Brian Kishnick, who was the Troy City manager, and whereas Troy City Council immediately authorized the referral of this matter to a labor and employment law attorney for an independent, thorough, and detailed review of the articulated concerns, and whereas Troy City Council was presented with a detailed attorney-client privilege communication in regards to this matter, and whereas Troy City Council has the ability to waive attorney-client privilege, and whereas Troy City Council defeated a motion to waive the attorney-client privilege on August 8, 2016, and whereas on March 11, 2018, Troy City Council unanimously terminated its employment agreement with Brian Kishnick for cause, and whereas at that public meeting, residents offered speculation that the privilege and confidential Labor Council's report from 2016 could have detailed conduct that was similar to the conduct leading to Brian Kishnick's termination, and whereas many residents have criticized the City Council's lack of transparency, therefore be it resolved that Troy City Council hereby waives the attorney-client privilege on the Labor Council's 2016 report examining articulated concerns about Brian Kishnick and authorizes the release of the report and exhibits, which shall be redacted as allowed under the Freedom of Information Act. A redacted copy of this communication shall be attached to the minutes of this meeting and can be released in response to any request from a government entity, media source, or Freedom of Information Act request.
Support.
Moved by Councilman Hamilton, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Abraham, that we approve H1, a council referral submitted by Councilmember Hamilton as read and printed in the agenda packet. Discussion. Councilman Hamilton.
I had a speech written, but honestly, what everyone spoke about in council today kind of shows where I'm coming from. I'll keep it simple. Truth plus transparency equals trust. If we want the people of Troy to trust us, if we want our government to run effectively, we have to tell them the truth. So I ask council to support this.
Councilwoman Hoderick.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have written remarks because I think this is an important juncture and I want to keep my thoughts straight. It is our job on City Council to set forth an environment, culture, and tone that helps us heal and move forward through what has been a very tough time. We took one step in that direction when we removed the city manager and appointed an interim city manager very well versed to serve us through this situation. But we can and must do more, clearly, to restore faith and confidence. To be blunt, we have an infected wound here. It's time to rip the Band-Aid off and get about treating it properly so it can heal. We can do this by releasing the investigative report in 2016 and set forth a conversation that can be healthy and constructive. Essentially, we find ourselves in a crisis communication situation as a governing body and as a community. The first rule of crisis management is to face it head on and to avoid any sense of cover-up. It's fundamental. I would argue that we were in such a situation in 2016 as well, and that's why I felt the report should be released then. I understand that some fellow members of council did not feel the same. Now we most definitely are in such a situation, and it's time to face it. There's three pieces to crisis management. Tell it all, tell it fast, and tell it ourselves. The fact is, we can most certainly waive attorney-client privilege. I'm weary of the argument as being some sort of absolute that we can't do it. At this point, it's sounding like an excuse to duck and cover. I'm not suggesting that legal advice should not be considered, and we did listen and talk with our attorneys. I respect our city attorney and value her integrity and conservative approach very much. But we're leaders, and we must consider all aspects of our decision in totality. Staff morale and the very real and legitimate staff need to feel validated and to take a public sigh of relief that concerns have been seen and heard and comprehended. The priority of effective oversight, 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 oversight. and all of us working together openly and constructively to address anything systemic that needs to change to achieve that oversight and protect our integrity. There's a need to ensure the communication void caused by the secrecy surrounding the report is not filled with misinformation, rumors, exaggerations, political gamesmanship from all sides, dribbled out over time. It just hurts us all, and it will continue. Those are just some of the additional considerations swirling through my mind. I could probably talk for another 10 minutes about what keeps me up at night. It's been a difficult time for a long time for many of the folks who fulfill the important role of being our public servants. They have to feel that we have not had their backs. We need to change that dynamic immediately and get this dark time behind us. Darkness cannot exist where there is light. It's time to turn the light on, and that's why I'm voting to release this report.
Councilman Henderson?
I didn't write anything, but I'll ramble for a little bit. It's easy after what happened 3 or 4 weeks ago to have a previous history and to make a snap decision in an awful scenario. So the right thing to do was to fire the city manager with cause, which we did, no severance. 2 years ago, however, we had zero history. There were some situations that came up. We addressed them. In fact, I've printed off a handful of things here that the city attorney has provided to us. One is a media statement that we put out almost immediately after the incident and after we'd had several closed sessions. And this media statement outlines all of the infractions that were in the report. What it didn't include is I'm going to call it tabloid style information that was put in this report. And if you're interested in that, that's fine. You can, entertain yourself as you read that if this thing gets released tonight. And it's a lot of information about some things that the person that put the report together assumed or insinuated about the city manager with not really a lot of proof. It was just his pontification about what was going on with the city manager in his personal life. And that's fine. You can put that in.
Councilman Henderson, you got to be careful what you say about a closed session meeting. At this point, if it gets released, that changes the game, I think. But
okay. Thanks for the caution.
I'm getting.
Am I getting close?
Our city attorney is giving me the.
Yeah. This is very personal for me because I take great offense to people like John Koulis out there that like to cast all sorts of stones. It's really easy to stand there and point your fingers at us without having the information that we have over several meetings. And when we have to make decisions about the city manager and the way the city is run, we have to rely on all that information that's given to us in every meeting and make these large decisions about a city that we all love, we all care for, and we all have to manage. So again, we have a media statement that was put out. We have further to that in the Detroit News published on July 27th or 28th. The second paragraph in this media, this article in the Detroit News, City Attorney Lori Bloom said no criminal matters occurred, no disciplinary action was required against Brian Kishnick. That's from our city attorney, and she has been in all those meetings and has been guiding us along the way. Further to that, in August 22 of 2016, we in our meeting, we put together a game plan for the city manager to do better, to change policy that he had stepped over, and to make things better in the city. And we were watching him, as Councilman Baker has been kind of thrown under the bus about not watching. We watched, and we tried to make the process better. I know there were a lot of policy changes that he had made going forward. So to stand out there and to point those kind of fingers, I take offense to it. There is nobody that takes this job as seriously as I do. I spend a lot of hours. We get paid for 2 meetings a month, $165 a month. And yeah, there's the door. We could all hit that door. And I'm telling you, I spend sometimes 40 hours a week doing this job over and above these 2 meetings a month that we do. So to have to take on some of these accusations from people that don't have the privilege that we have of sitting in these meetings, representing the people of Troy, and doing the best that we can under the circumstances, I take offense to the accusations. In terms of releasing the report, I'm completely against it. It's attorney-client privileged information. If we didn't offer that, Brian Kishnick clams up, doesn't give any information to the attorney that was investigating this. Potentially the employees that were giving this information to the attorney at that time might have clammed up. Our whistleblower policy, which we have revised and I think needs further revision, would be it would be a joke. We need to protect the integrity of the whistleblower policies in the city of Troy. And to that end, releasing that report and destroying the integrity of attorney-client privilege is not the way to go about this. Off the soapbox, sir.
Are you ready? Mayor Pro Tem Abraham.
Thank you, Mayor. I too have a prepared statement. In the summer of 2016, Troy City Council authorized a labor and employee attorney to review concerns that a city employee had raised regarding questionable expenditures made by the former city manager. In August of that same year, the council rejected a resolution to release a redacted version of the investigative report in a 4-3 vote. In the past month, our residents have witnessed reports in the media about other questionable behavior by our former city manager. The arrest on a domestic assault charge, his firing, a violation of bond, and the creation of a toxic work environment. Right or wrong, our residents are making assumptions about a pattern of behavior by the former city manager. Right or wrong, our residents are questioning whether city council could have prevented this. Frankly, it's understandable why they would. Believe it is of the utmost importance that the public be able to review all the information that this governing body saw when we made our decisions about not firing Mr. Kishnick in 2016 or releasing the report. A lack of public information is a breeding ground for rumor, speculation, and innuendo. It perpetuates mistrust in the government. Last year, that mistrust manifested itself in a citizen-proposed charter amendment being placed on the ballot, an amendment so prescriptive and restrictive it would have brought normal operations of the city to a screeching halt. Releasing the report won't resolve all trust issues, but it would be a significant step forward. It will allow residents to have context into the full situation and allows the entire community to move forward and heal together. Some might contend that maintaining attorney-client privilege is the responsible thing to do because it shields the city from litigation. But the reality is we've already seen litigation because we did not release the report in 2016. Continuing to keep this report private is no guarantee that we won't see litigation further. Some say, city manager's gone, just let things be. To those that ask that question, I would ask this question. Would you say to the MSU Board of Trustees, Larry Nasser is gone now, just let things be? Would you say to a resident of Flint, the water is safe now, just let things be? Why would the situation be any different? Everyone at this table understands that as elected officials and government employees that we are held to a higher standard. Maintaining integrity is essential to fostering public trust. We can only achieve that by allowing our actions to be as transparent as possible, so we can show our constituents that doing government best isn't just a tagline in Troy. Our words must be demonstrated by action. I was taught to do the right thing even when it's hard. I was taught to do the right thing especially when it's hard. I was taught that it's never too late to do the right thing. The man who taught me this is laying on his deathbed as we speak. That man is my father. But the conviction he instilled in me is what brings me the strength to be here tonight. I am voting yes on this resolution, and I ask that my fellow council members vote yes as well.
Thank you. I'll go if you guys want to wait. It's up to you. Mine's pretty simple. I've tried to be very consistent since day one on this issue. I think if you go back and watch the tape, I think some people have made some copies of that and made that available. This boils down very simply with me. The city attorney, our city attorney, the current outside labor attorney, with more than 40, not to date you, Ms. Bloom, but between the both of them, probably 40 to 50 years of collective municipal attorney experience, have advised each one of the council members that sit here on this table and me not to release the attorney-client privilege document, and that the release of that could result in potential lawsuits against the city. Now, you may sit out there and think that that's not something that you should take seriously, but I take that very seriously. Because when you go against your attorney's advice, and I would ask each and every one of you out there, if you sat in that position in your job and went against the advice of your attorneys, and believe me, I've talked to many, many, many attorneys. Some of them are friends of mine. Some of them have been in the business for over 60 years. Every single one told me, do not release that report. Now, that's my basis for this. It's pretty simple for me, because I do not want to subject this city to potential lawsuits because of this release. And I think each council member that sits up here, when you go against the advice of your attorney, you put yourself out there on your own. And I think everyone needs to understand that. This is not simple. Believe me. Believe me or don't believe me, I don't care what's in that report. It's insignificant to me. I wish I could talk to you about it. I really do. But I'm going to follow the advice of my lawyers, and I am not going to be the one that goes against their advice, releases this document, and puts the city in jeopardy for a lawsuit. It's just that simple for me. And you can chastise me and you can chastise members up here because of what we're doing, but what we're also doing here is protecting the rights of the employees that came forward with their, whether you believe it or not. We are. I talked about it 2 years ago. There's police protection for police officers. It's called Garrity. It's the exact same thing. They're allowed to talk under Garrity, knowing that that statement will never be used against them in a court of law. And that's exactly what's happening here. We promised those employees that if they came forward and they gave statements, that they would not be released. And now I'm being asked to go against that. And I'm not going to do that. I'm really not going to do that. Although I've been chastised and make it look like I'm hiding stuff and all of these innuendos, I would be very happy to release this report if the employees that came forward and were interviewed, gave statements, everyone in that report waived their right. I'd say, okay. And then that wouldn't even set a precedent for me. Because in the future, if somebody came forward they would know that they could at least give a statement and everyone would have to agree that it gets released. I could live with that. But for me to not even consider them and go ahead and release it without even talking to them is worse. I've had employees come up to me after the last vote and thank me, personally thank me for not releasing that report because of the attorney-client privilege. So there is the other side to this. But the main side for me is I'm going to follow my attorney's advice. And my attorneys have told me, do not release this report. And in my opinion, if this council decides to do that, you have put yourself out there on your own. Councilman Baker, Councilman Pennington?
I'll be a long time. You're going to be a long time. Oh, I won't be that long. I'll go. Is it okay? Yeah. So after we've settled that, I figured I'd go next. We have heard from a group of people that obviously want to hear this report released. I also hear from people that had the other side of the coin, and they sent us a letter, and I'd like to read one of the letters that were sent to us. Honorable Mayor and council members, what is the purpose of revealing the 2016 report from the closed session? What will the community do with this information? Citizens will know what infractions the manager committed, but is that useful information at this point? We already know who voted to move forward with a plan of action to mitigate his behavior and who voted to make his evaluation document public. Is the purpose of disclosure to emphasize how each council person voted? Please consider what the citizens can do with this information and whether, at this point, it has any benefit to the community. Transparency is a great concept. It prevents elected officials from using their powers to benefit themselves personally, whether for financial gain, to further the career of a relative or friend, or to collude to do something illegal. However, past information which is of no use in moving forward is akin to airing our dirty laundry in public. Insisting on revealing it now appears to be self-serving and does nothing to further the good of the community. Kishnick is gone. Please move forward. Since we fired Kishnick, I've talked to quite a few employees that work at the city, and it wasn't just women that were bullied by Brian Kishnick. He was an equal opportunity bully. This is something that was not clear to all of us in City Council. Some of us are closer with the employees, and some of us work a day job and are not. But we represent all the citizens in Troy, not just the small group that has come forward to want us to release this report. Like Mayor said, I have to side with our attorneys. I want to applaud Mark Miller and the fantastic employees of the City of Troy. He's done a great job in a crisis situation. The city and the staff, after tonight, regardless of the vote, we need to move forward together. We need a fresh start together, the city council, and the employees. We all deserve a fresh start.
Thank you. Councilman, who's left? Councilman Baker.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll thank all of you that spoke out tonight and in the past. And I will call out Maggie Hughes again for, I guess, bringing on the conversation even more. I think that maybe initially I was a little surprised to see you, but I think that what you've done is definitely got all of us thinking and created a good environment for a good conversation to happen. So, Maggie, I'm sure it wasn't easy for you, but thank you for starting this ball rolling. Also, to Councilman Hamilton, I initially wasn't so sure why you brought this referral. I had some speculations, but as I've thought about this over the past few weeks, I see why you're doing it, at least why I believe you're doing it. I believe you're doing it for the right reasons. and with a good heart and a good mind, and because you care. I care too. And that's what makes this so difficult. 7 of us up here all care and all have our own views and outlook and backgrounds that we bring to this table. And that makes for interesting conversation out here, certainly behind closed doors. And it also makes it difficult when we are divided on an issue, and it appears we're divided on an issue again, this issue, as we were a year and 8 months ago, I believe, as somebody said. In August of 2016, I voted not to waive the attorney-client privilege because I strongly believed that it was the right thing for the city to not release that report at that time, not to waive for the privilege. I had very serious concerns about the employees who were given their honest interpretation and their honest facts of everything that had happened regarding the whistleblower situation and the other incidents that were brought forth at that time. And I worried that if we released the report, it would prohibit or make it difficult for someone in a future situation with a future city manager or future employee situation to have the confidence in the system that their rights, they could speak freely without facing retribution. I was about protecting the employees back then, as ironic as that may sound to some of you tonight. It wasn't about protecting Brian Kishnick. It's never been about protecting Brian Kishnick for me. When this happened, I'd known Brian for about 6 months. When I didn't have a friendship with Brian. We were certainly cordial, but for me, it wasn't about protecting Brian, and never has been, never will be. So it's difficult for me to hear and to read that, you know, my vote was to protect Brian. My vote then was to protect the attorney-client privilege and the precedent in the city. I'm an attorney myself. I take that privilege very, very seriously. It does a lot of good things for everybody in this country, frankly. I sit here and I wonder, you know, are we doing the right thing if we release the report? Are we doing the right thing if we don't release the report? And I've heard arguments on both sides that are very strong and very passionate, and the difficult thing for me is I listen to all of them and I think, well, he's right or she's right. Of course, that makes sense. And I think that's one of the main difficulties. I've said difficulties a few times, I'll probably continue to say it. But it's difficult because there's pieces of everything set up here and out there that ring true for me. And I am, however, tasked with making a decision on behalf of the city, on behalf of the city employees and the residents. I want to address, just for a moment, Mr. Kulish's comment about watching. I did say that I would be watching and we would be watching City Manager Kishnick. And as it related to his action plan that was a public document and the allegations that were made public and that we learned about, we were watching. I wasn't admittedly watching for the type of behavior that occurred in Clawson or allegedly occurred in Clawson in March. That was not something that was on my radar. It was not something we were told to be watchful of. So I was watching for financial issues. I was watching for personal meals. I was watching for cell phone accessories. I was watching for use of a city car. I was watching for proper reporting of accidents of a city car. Those were the things that I was watching for, and I believe that we all did continue to watch those things quite well. Allegations of a hostile and toxic work environment. Some of us may have known more or had heard more than others. Do each and every one of us hear rumors and things at times? Sure, at the swim club, I'm sure you've heard probably more than I have, in all honesty, and that doesn't surprise me. But I have to say that I never felt like there was a toxic environment where city employees were running scared, and if they were, by all means, I don't discount anyone's feelings or how it was, they weren't brought to me. They weren't brought to, and if they were brought to our HR director, those still weren't brought to me and brought to us on council. That's not the way the system works. You know, we updated our whistleblower policy after this incident in the summer of 2016. And up until that time, it wasn't clear the reporting procedures to council. As it stands now, I'm prohibited from reaching out directly to a city employee about work issues. Our charter requires that I go through the city manager. Obviously, that creates a problem if there's an issue with the city manager. If that's a charter issue, and as we've learned, charter amendments are difficult, and that's something that maybe needs to be addressed, maybe it doesn't. Maybe that system works just fine. But there hasn't been, I guess to my point, I'm not allowed to go to our HR director, Jeanette, sorry Jeanette for mentioning you by name, and say, hey, can I see what's in this file? I need to know what's going on. I can't do that. And you know, that's the system as it is. Let's get back to the report. I completely understand why people want to see this report. I waited for this report when it was being written because I wanted to see what was in it. I needed to know what was going on, and I understand that our citizens care very much about their city, and they want to know what's going on and what happened, whether it was in the past or whether it's current or moving forward. They have a right to know, and I believe that just because we are the elected body, we are elected to represent you, and your interests and your cares and desires are just as much are ours. So I understand that. And I also understand the other side of it that says it is, he has been fired. I've heard people say to me, I had a neighbor say to me, what good would that do at this point? The attorney-client privilege is a huge deal as an attorney. I understand that. And I hear the mayor when he speaks about putting the city at risk with lawsuits by releasing this report. Because it's not a black or white issue, it's a gray issue, we have to balance those interests. And where I come down on this issue is, what is the better thing for our city moving forward? We're clearly divided up here. It appears there's some division in the city on this issue. And what is the best way to remedy that? I do believe we have a responsibility to remedy that. And, you know, I would like to think there's some sort of compromise that can be reached here. I'm not so sure that there can be, but, you know, I'm going to move to amend H1 to authorize the release of a redacted report that redacts all of the attorney-written opinion and analysis, but leaves fully intact all of the facts of the report, because I believe what the citizens need to hear are the facts, and that's what they care about. I just have to think how to word that.
I mean, I'll support that to get it on the table for discussion. Unless you were thinking about rewording that somehow.
Well, I'm not sure of the exact words other than, here for me the situation is, I think, look, I'm an attorney, people talk to attorneys, there's probably some attorneys out here. Attorneys have different opinions and different analysis of things all the time. That's why everyone hates us. Because frankly, that and this report issue apparently, but for me, I think the facts are what's important here, and the citizens of the city do deserve to know the facts and the allegations. I believe, I've reviewed the report again recently, and I believe that it can be redacted to show the facts. What I don't think needs to necessarily be divulged, and maybe would protect the integrity of the attorney-client privilege somewhat in my mind, is the maybe what Councilman Henderson referred to as the innuendo, or the actual attorney work product of, the analysis. I think that we have a very smart and educated electorate and citizen group, and if they could see all of the facts as presented in this report, they could take and research the statutes and the codes and the charter and know exactly what the issues were or weren't based on the facts. I'd like to think that would be a compromise that could make more than 4 of us happy or agree to something, because I think that on balance, going back to what I was saying, the right thing to do is to reveal what the basis was for this report and the issues in full. We already started that process with the media statement. We started the process with what was already released, but those facts don't tell the whole story. And it's very difficult for us to tell you, well, no, you're speculating, when we can't tell you what actually is the truth. I mean, that's the big problem. We're stuck here with that. But because I believe that each attorney can give a different opinion about something, I don't know that it's necessary for everyone to have Attorney Craig Lang's opinion. I think that plenty of opinions can be formed on their own based on a thorough review of the facts themselves. I think that would satisfy not everyone, but I think it would go a long way towards healing the city and providing the transparency of the facts, which are what the key issue is. I was doing some research earlier today, and this isn't necessarily a FOIA issue, but it is in a sense. And the Supreme Court has said that the basic purpose of FOIA is to ensure an informed citizenry, vital to the functioning of a democratic society, needed to check against corruption and to hold the governors accountable to the governed. The Freedom of Information Act is often explained as a means for citizens to know what their government is up to. The Supreme Court stressed that this phrase should not be dismissed as a convenient formalism. Rather, it defines a structural necessity in a real democracy. For me, that speaks to the facts, that what people want to see and what they should see for being in line are the facts themselves, not necessarily the attorney opinion. And I'm proposing that amendment as a way of trying to get us to come together as a body. And recognizing that any redactions will do, there will be people who are saying, well, why'd you redact that? I understand that. And that'll maybe create more questions. But ultimately, I think if the people have all of the facts and they can read them as we read them, they can make their own determinations and conclusions based on a good, solid reading of those facts.
I couldn't write it all down. But I'll support it to get it on the table for discussion. So if you could help me out, City Clerk Dixon, amend H1 to include the language to redact all City Attorney Lang's opinion and redact the facts and not redact the facts, but allow the facts through a normal redacted document. City Attorney Bloom, is that pretty much what he tried to get there?
Yeah, I believe the words that he used were to redact the opinion, innuendo, or any attorney work product, and to leave the facts intact into the report.
But those facts would be normally redacted by you, or you would look at those for redaction?
I'm guessing that if this passes, that I would probably be charged with the responsibility for reviewing that and doing those redactions. I would certainly like to get it to council before I actually release it, though, to make sure that you have seen it.
Okay, now we can ask some questions. Councilman Hamilton.
I want to thank you, Councilmember Baker, for your take. I think what you're saying is I'm more than willing to compromise. I think it's a reasonable compromise. It's, I guess I just want to get defined a little better exactly what's going to be taken out, taken in. I don't know if we vote to support this, would we then have like a review process with council, or how would? I guess what we could do is, if we vote and support this as you said it, and you know, some of us feel it doesn't reveal everything, we could later vote to reveal a little more, I guess, right? So, you know, I thank you for being willing to compromise.
Councilwoman Holderich.
Councilman Baker, I feel your pain. I do. One of the things I was talking about is the allegations and judgments that are just flying as a result of all of this. But this is crazy to suggest that we can take a report written by a highly respected, credible attorney that we hired that had served this city for years and years and years and years and years and is very respected, and somehow have the 7 of us agree on what's subjective and what's fact. The fact is, this was said back in August of 2016, that there were folks that felt there was bias, and they took issue with that attorney. Okay, that's a fact of the discussion that's open. All right. That might be if we released it and you read it, you may have the same reaction. You might read it and say, I understand why they did a plan of action and gave them a second chance. You might read it and wonder what the heck some of us were thinking. Everybody's going to read this, if they got it, and blow up for about 2 weeks, and then we're going to go back to working on fighting for the integrity of the city and working on the rules. This process, we're watching MSU go through this same painful, torturous, reputationally damaging stuff at the very same time we're supposed to be going out to do a search for a new city manager. So I appreciate that you're trying to bring a compromise. I like compromise, like to bring them to the table. It's just going to create further division between us and the community, in my opinion, by going down this path. Because you're talking about charging someone with now going through and trying to discern what are facts, subjective. This was an informed attorney. Some of us have stronger opinions about the bias than others. We've had trust issues create division in this community in the past, and it's continuing to resurface now. And it's going to continue to fester while we go through whatever awful process this would be to try to do this redacting. I mean, come on. I'm just trying to be honest and candid.
Okay. I'll try to be honest and candid. I'm always in support of trying to, when there's a division of 4-3 or whatever, I'm always in favor of trying to come to some sort of a compromise. And quite honestly, Councilwoman Holderich, if the resolution passed as it was and it was redacted, I've been told that a good portion of that would be redacted out, almost all of it, to some degree. So we would get criticized for that too. We're going to get criticized what we do, what we don't do, from one side or the other, no matter what we do. I think Councilman Baker has made a very logical suggestion, because the facts are the facts to the interpretation of who reads the facts. And that makes sense to me. And I think that most of those facts have already been released, quite honestly. But it makes sense to me. If you're looking for a compromise, I can't get around what the attorneys have told me. I can't get around that, and this looks like a possible way around that, and it looks like a possible way of still listening to the employees. And I'm worried of statements that could be released. That's what I'm worried about. Councilman Henderson.
So one of my biggest problems with this report is the innuendo and that sort of thing. So I applaud Councilman Solomon for bringing forward the revision here, because I think I can probably wrap my arms around something like that as well. Again, we'll get criticized if we don't release it. We'll get criticized if we release it redacted. We'll get criticized if we release it uber redacted. So, you know, if people want to know what's in this to the extent that we knew what was in this report, then let's release it and redact as much as we can, again, taking out the innuendo and the assumptions that were made, because there was no evidence of anything that I read. Am I stepping on a line here again? All right, that would warrant putting that information out. And I just want to talk about the toxic environment here at the city as well. When we hired Brian Kishnick, I think it was just Dane and I were on council at the time. We were coming off a period of time when we had a mayor problem. We had a city manager that had left us. We put out a countrywide search to find the best candidate. We all ended up on one candidate. We hired him. We charged him with creating a better scenario in the city of Troy that employees could get their arms around. And I remember distinctly, he would have open houses for every department. He reincorporated picnics for the, I remember going to a picnic at the DPW. There were some picnics here on the grounds. It seemed to me the first couple of years that things were going rather well, and he was doing a good job of trying to improve the morale in the city. And then the situation that we're talking about here took place. Again, at that time, at that snapshot in time, the history that we had with Brian was very good. We gave him a plan forward, and then the resulting 3 or 4 weeks. So again, it's real easy at this stage of the game to look back over the last 2 years and make some judgments and assessments and think, okay, you know, what if we would have fired him 2 years ago? But we didn't have that history at that time. 2 years ago, we did not have that history, and I can't stress that enough. So, and one other point too that popped in and out, but we at no time during this situation 2 years ago or a year and a half ago did we as a council recommend the firing of Brian Kishnick. As a council, we did not have that recommendation. Our recommendation was unified in that we had a game plan forward, and we put this game plan for him. We delayed his pay increase. I don't even know how long, but he had followed a path upward. We don't come to City Hall all week long. We can't go to HR, but our direct reports are two. We have the city manager, who is a direct report, and we have the city attorney, who's a direct report. All of the information that comes from the city, with the exception of a couple people here on council, is filtered through the city manager and the city attorney. That's our extent of communication with the city. So to blanketly slap us around for not knowing what was going on inside the city is a little bit unfair. And again, I can't stress that enough. We're just not here all the time. We do the best we can under the circumstances and within the scope of the charter. And I'll close my statement at that.
Thank you. Councilman Pennington.
Well, it's 9:30 and we're about halfway done, so I'm going to keep this as brief as possible. I applaud Councilman Baker also for bridging the divide here, but I strongly suggest that we meet with our attorneys who have advised us to not release this. We at least meet with them and get their advice on what to release in a report. That would be my suggestion before we release it.
Are you suggesting an amendment to meet with the attorneys?
Yes, before the report is released. Yes.
Report's released?
We meet in closed session for things that are very minor compared to this. So yes, that would be my suggestion.
I'll support that amendment.
Mayor.
I'd like to add one more. Small one.
Well, let's do this one first. Amendment to the amendment would be to meet with city attorney and our outside labor attorney to discuss the final outcome of the redacted additions put forward by Councilman Baker.
Just so I'm clear, you have an amendment right now on the floor to authorize the release of the report. I'm just going to read what I wrote, if that's okay. The resolution that you'd be amending would be resolved that Troy City Council hereby amends by substitution item H1 by striking and replacing the last paragraph with resolved that Troy City Council hereby authorizes the release of the report and exhibits with the exception of the attorney-written opinion, analysis, innuendo, and work product, but retaining the facts of the documents which shall be redacted as allowed under the Freedom of Information Act. A redacted copy of the releasable report shall be attached to the minutes of this meeting and can be released in response to any request from a government entity, media source, or Freedom of Information Act request, and such report will not be released until after City Council has the opportunity to meet with labor attorney in closed session.
That did it. Let's have a discussion on that, and then you can...
You need a support.
No, I supported it. Now we can have a discussion. Councilman Baker.
I have concerns about drawing it out that much longer, trying to get us in a closed session to discuss a redacted report that we are not yet sure how it would be redacted and the timing of that. I don't think, while I get the potential responsibility of that, I think the alternative, we've met with Labor Council, can't talk about what we talked about with them because those are privileged communications. I don't think that we would necessarily learn anything new from that. Am I limited to speaking to what that amendment is only at this point?
I would appreciate it.
Well, then this relates. I don't foresee 7 of us micromanaging what redactions get made. I think that we have a full-time city attorney and staff who I would entrust that responsibility to make those determinations as the chief legal counsel for the city. She is very conservative with those redactions and analysis generally, and I think that that would be the wiser choice than trying to bounce it back and forth between all of us. And I fear that if we were to go into closed session, even with that, we get divided on one line. I think at that point we should, we've gone too many layers deep and we're just getting or earning even less trust from the community at that point. So I don't see necessarily the value of doing that at this point.
Could I ask City Attorney, I hate to put you on the spot, but the First Amendment that was made by Councilman Baker, would that alleviate your concerns that were expressed to me regarding release of the document?
Certainly that, again, I'd have to look at the report to see how easy it's going to be to do that redaction and what material would need to be redacted. So, again, I hate to be put on the spot without the report in front of me, and this is all new information.
I understand. That's where my angst is, though, of your original recommendation.
I'm happy to look at it. I'm happy to see if it can be done to kind of facilitate the compromise that has been brought forward. I'm happy to try that.
That would be distributed to council before it was released?
Yes.
Any further discussion on the amendment to the amendment? Mayor Pro Tem Abraham.
Thank you, Mayor. People see statistics, whether it's in a newspaper article or on a media report, and they give it credence because numbers are numbers and numbers don't lie. Reality is, statistics are extremely subjective. They're subjective on who you ask the question to, sample size, a whole host of things can put into question what those numbers or what some people consider facts are. I am concerned that seeing the division at the table, all of us are going to have a different opinion of what's a fact and what's not. And when we think about what we need to do to heal this community and move forward, we can't keep doing the same thing again. That's the definition of insanity. I'm not sure we'll ever come to an agreement, and it will still have a divided council, and we'll have gained nothing. Our community deserves better. Let's just rip off the Band-Aid, release the report. Dragging it out, whether it's to look at additional redactions beyond just names, is not going to give our residents the confidence that we're taking their concerns seriously. Let's just do it. Be leaders. I work in a corporate environment. I've managed people, large teams of people. I've worked with attorneys, both on HR matters and contractual matters. I take their opinions extremely seriously. I don't take waiving attorney-client privilege lightly. It is a serious matter. I've had numerous conversations with our city attorney, and we've had frank and honest conversation. There's litigation risk no matter what we do. We've already borne the fruit of litigation attempts. I think whether we release the report or not, there will be litigation. But at least we can move forward with clarity and transparency if we release the report. The risk is there. How we choose to address it is on us. And that, to me, is what leadership embodies. Thank you.
Any other comments on the amendment to the amendment?
This is just the amendment to go to closed session. The amendment to the amendment to go to closed session.
Right.
Okay. I'm okay.
Let's have a vote on that, Ms.
Wait,
Dixon.
you know what? I'm sorry. I'm listening to everybody so carefully. I've lost what we're voting on. I apologize. And I am listening. But I really want to understand.
Could you read it again,
Sure.
Ms. Dixon?
The resolution that you'd be voting on right now would be resolved that Troy City Council hereby amends by substitution item H1 by striking and replacing the last paragraph with resolved that Troy City Council hereby authorizes the release of the report and exhibits with the exception of the attorney-written opinion, analysis, innuendo, and work product, but retaining the facts of the documents, which shall be redacted as allowed under the Freedom of Information Act. A redacted copy of the releasable report shall be attached to the minutes of this meeting and can be released in response to any request from a governmental entity, media source, or Freedom of Information Act request. Such report will not be released until after City Council has the opportunity to meet with the city's labor attorney in closed session.
Okay. Councilman Baker.
This vote is just as it pertains to the part added by Councilmember Pennington?
Correct.
And then we would then take the what I amended?
Correct.
And if that didn't pass, we'd go back. Okay.
Correct.
Just want to make sure.
Just so I can clarify, Councilmember this amendment will replace the last paragraph of Councilmember Hamilton's item. Your amendment would therefore not, if this passes, your amendment to your original amendment without the closed session part in it will not be moot. It will be gone. So this amendment will amend Councilmember Hamilton's. If this fails, then you would go to the first amendment that you made. And that would be, if that passes, that would be the last paragraph.
Okay.
Okay? Just to be clear.
Councilman Henderson.
I don't want to wake you up. I simply want to add that we include the city manager plan of action July 25th, 2016 to any report. Can we do that at this stage, or do we have?
We're going to take a vote on Councilman Pennington's going to closed session. Then if you want to make another amendment, you can make another amendment.
Okay.
The vote, Ms. Dixon?
Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
No.
Councilmember Baker?
No.
Councilmember Hamilton?
No.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
No.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
No.
Motion fails.
Now we are back to Councilman Baker's replacement of the last paragraph to Councilman Hamilton's original resolution. Is there any further discussion? Councilman Hamilton.
I would just say I brought this up originally, and so after redaction, if what you propose goes through, if I feel that there's something core to the report missing that wasn't released, I may bring this up later on to release more. However, I would rather release something than nothing, to be honest. I think it's a good step forward. I'm going to support you on this. But rest assured, if we don't release what I think is very important for our city to know, I'll bring it up again to release the full report. That's all I'm saying.
Councilman Baker.
Whoever I am, I'm going to withdraw my amendment. I appreciate the support from Councilmember Hamilton, but I don't think that another split decision on a redacted, amended thing that will then create more timing issues and potential for more continued issues is the right thing to do. I appreciate the support, but I have to say where that leaves me. I'm going to support releasing the entire report, redacting the names, and here's why. I think that people are tired of this, what just happened, because it is creating more and more confusion. And my intent was never to create more confusion and more problems. I do believe that it could have been redacted in the way I proposed, or at least in my head. I've looked at the report thoroughly. But if we're going to not have full support to do something like that, and then have the possibility of coming back in 2 weeks with this conversation again, while this will be a split vote, I think that on balance it is the better thing for the city. And I take my attorney-client privilege very seriously as an attorney. I take transparency very seriously as an elected official. I take council's advice very seriously as well. But I believe that we do ultimately have a responsibility to build some sort of trust. Is this going to be the perfect way to do that? No, I don't think so. But it'll be the right step in the right direction. What the speculation that's out there is hurting us more than anything else we've talked about tonight. And the only way to truly alleviate that speculation and to try to turn the page as we tried with the former city manager in the past and with the community as a whole is to do this, in my opinion. It is with a heavy heart and a difficulty for me because of the personal relationships I have with each and every one of you up here. I know it's not going to make you all happy, but I think that on balance it's the right thing for the people of our community and for the city as a whole, for the city employees, for the residents. So I will be supporting releasing the report at this point, although I do think we should release the plan of action from the city manager. As a reminder, it's a public document already, but to show that action was taken by this council. And I'm assuming that proper redaction of names will be done anyway, and there may be other redactions, but if it's too divisive to try to cut and paste, I'd rather be divisive and release the report in its entirety. There'll be less speculation at that point.
Does that need to be done in an amendment to attach it to the report?
You should amend the resolution to include the plan of action report also. So if you would have to do a regular amendment for that.
I'll amend it to include the city manager plan of action report, the media report, and the Detroit News article.
Support.
Who supported that?
I did.
Okay, moved by the chair and supported by Councilman Hamilton that we amend H1 to include the addition of the city manager plan of action, the media report, and the Detroit News article. Is there any further discussion on that? The only thing that I just want to make it clear to my colleagues that you are voting to release the document against the advice of our city attorney and our current outside labor attorney. I just want to make sure that that's on record. The vote, Ms. Dixon?
Just to clarify, this is the amendment to include those documents. We will still need to vote on the original resolution to release the entire report.
Understood.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Motion passes. Hopefully with the redaction that, I know, this will satisfy the curiosity. I don't think you're going to get what you thought you were going to get, that's for sure. Now we'll take a vote on the original H1
With the amendment.
with the amendment.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
No.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
No.
Mayor Slater?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Motion passes. It's 9:45. I know there's a lot of people still here waiting for our regular business. Does anyone need a break from council at this point? Shall we continue to...
5-minute recess, okay?
Pardon me?
5-minute recess, okay?
We'll be in recess for 5 minutes. City Council is now back in session. Before we get started with regular business, I know there's lots of you left for I-6. So I am going to move to amend the rules to allow us to move I-6 and the folks that want to speak that are not from the city on that item forward also.
Support. Yep. Unanimous.
All right, moved by the chair and supported by all council to waive the rules to allow the movement. Let's take a vote on that, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Motion passes. So we're going to move, bear with me a minute, I got to get to it. Public comment, which is Q1, public comment for items on or not on the agenda from members outside of the public. Troy. And I will call on Kathy Delgado, who wishes to speak on us. Is that good?
That was very good. Hello.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening. As indicated, my name is Kathy Delgado, and I have been the manager of Troy Racquet Club for 21 years. I will keep my comments brief and to the point. I read the proposal submitted to the City of Troy on behalf of All Court Tennis, LLC. I was astonished to find my name listed as its manager. This disingenuous submission of my name has angered me, since during Brian DiVirgilio's tenure at Troy Racquet Club, our relationship would at best be described as difficult. At no time before, during, or after the bid process has any representative from All Court Tennis, LLC, contacted me or reached out to me. I have no intention of working for All Court Tennis, LLC at this point or in the future. Again, in my 21 years, I have worked with dozens of tennis pros, and I have found that during the time Brian DiVirgilio worked at Troy Racquet Club, it is my opinion he did not foster a productive work environment. If chaos was what he was after, he succeeded. Don Pierce has owned and operated Troy Racquet Club for 40 years, or nearly. And during that time, he has always insisted on honesty and integrity. The current tennis pro staff, management, and members of the TRC are interested in continuing to be affiliated with the Troy Racquet Club should the Schoen Pierce bid be accepted. The lack of continuity could result in a very different picture. In conclusion, I strongly request the City Council revisit the recommendation made by the committee, as well as urge the City Council and the committee to dig deeper when vetting the two bids. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Tim Mulvihill, who wishes to speak on Q1. That's what's written down. Come forward. Come forward. I-6.
Hi, my name is Tim Mulvihill. I've been putting up domes since I was 15. I've gone on to China to work on domes. I went and installed the dome for Brian DiVirgilio. It was moved from a different site and needed to be vastly modified. Normally I'm given 1 week to put it up with no modifications. The project took about 3 weeks, which put him about 2 weeks after when he wanted it to open. And I knew he was very tight on money, and a couple months later I went after and said, you know, here's my invoice, that's what's going on. And instead he said, you know, we're not paying you, in fact we're suing you. And not wanting to get into a lawsuit, I just kind of walked away. During that process, I had brought my partner in to help speed this up for him. And so now 2 of the only local dome experts won't touch his accounts. And when you have a structure that's just held up with air, it's kind of important to have somebody not have to get on a plane and fly for 6 hours to come to your site. And at the end of the day, this isn't about getting a good deal for the city of Troy. This is about getting a good tennis environment for the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Brian DeVirgilio. Well, let me call on Chris Dobson first. Okay, thank you. I believe when this item is called up, you're going to get an opportunity to speak when the item is pulled up, but you're welcome to use 3 minutes now if you want to. Thank you. Okay. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I think I have everyone beat here. I grew up in Huntington Woods. I played tennis all my life. I was one of the first members of the Troy Racquet Club 40 years ago. John Kennedy was the head pro then. I also taught at Troy Racquet Club. My son is going on a tennis scholarship to Tulane University. I know the entire tennis community. We at All Court, Brian and Chris, want to continue to improve the tennis in Troy. We do not want to detract from the tennis in Troy. Some of the things that I heard tonight have nothing to do with the RFP that was issued by the City of Troy, that was fairly monitored, that was fairly vetted. People were called on behalf of both bidders. References were made. Here's a situation where things are taken out of context and no good deed goes unpunished. Brian and Chris in All Court put in their bid that every single member of the Troy Racquet Club would be offered a position, would be able to keep their position if All Court were the successful bidder. That's what happened. There was ultimate transparency. We said, if Troy wants to keep the staff, they can keep the staff. If they don't want to, we can find new staff. Wesson, what they've built in Pontiac, every tennis player in the community wants to attend Wesson Indoor Tennis Club. It is the best run club, has the best junior program, has the best leagues in the country, has the best system for courts, has everything state of the art. Online system, technology. The members love it. Some of the most successful business people in the community, in the Troy community, in the greater Metro Detroit community, praise what's going on at Wesson. I was there the other day. There were over 100 kids in that facility learning to play tennis. They have the best pros, bar none. But what Brian and Chris did in their bid, they did say, if the people at Troy want to stay, they're more than welcome. We'll continue to employ them. We want complete continuity. One other thing. Someone got up here tonight who spoke about the integrity of my client. It's interesting. They said there wasn't integrity. Yet 2 days ago, he called my client to congratulate them and say, anything you can do, we can do to help with the transition, we'll do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That concludes those that have signed up to speak. Public comment for items on or not on the agenda from members of the public outside of Troy. So now I will call I-6. Call upon City Administration to present I-6. Good evening. Thanks for staying up so late.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The City of Troy has had an agreement with Don Pierce for over 40 years. And due to the duration of those agreements and the extensions, the management determined that there should be an RFP process extended to find a tennis management company. The RFP was released in January 15th of this year to find a provider that would manage a year-round facility and provide court time, individual and group lessons, leagues, and clinics. 2 proposals were received, as you've heard. One was the Troy Racquet Club with Tom and Michelle Schoen with advice with Don Pierce, and the other company was All Court Tennis LLC with Brian DiVirgilio and Chris Dobson. Our committee of 4 reviewed proposals, interviewed each company, contacted references, and toured the facilities.
The evaluation committee recommended awarding a contract to All Court Tennis LLC based on the following criteria: free membership for Troy residents with reciprocal membership at West End facility in Pontiac, new state-of-the-art domes with the one dome to remain up year-round with air conditioning in the summer, also with some other capital improvements to the facility, updated technology to book tennis courts online, and an annual income to the city of $79,200.
We'd be happy to answer any questions that you had. Mary Beth from purchasing is here, so if you have any questions.
Thank you. I'm sure there'll be a couple questions probably. Who wants to go first? Anyone? Councilman Baker?
Oh, sure. I guess we've heard a lot tonight from residents and racket club members about the vetting process used. Could you speak a little bit to how references were checked? How deep did you go into checking references? Did you depend solely on what was provided in the RFP or in the bid? Or does your committee go beyond that where they feel it's necessary to research further, or are they strictly use the 4 corners of the bid in determining what is the best proposal?
Each company was asked to submit references, and I personally called each of those references, I believe there was 3 each, and asked them the same list of questions. And all had positive responses on both sides.
And we also contacted each facility. We had cold calls to each one, as well as site visits by numerous employees of the city at each facility to see if there was any issues that occurred.
In any of those the site visits or the cold calls, I'm sure not the references because people don't put bad references down. Did you hear anything comparable to what we heard tonight as far as some of the allegations against Mr. DiVirgilio and his club? Or, I mean, is this the first you've heard it?
No, the site visits, we gave our staff or employees who were doing those scenarios, we gave them different things to ask or to look for how their customer service was, because that was a big thing for us, was continued good customer service. And on all those instances came back with good reports.
Mr. Mayor, can I have a comment
yes,
related
Mr.
to
Mill.
that?
Sure.
To be fully honest, a number of members came forward to Elaine Bowe earlier today, and that's when she really became aware of these, I'll call them allegations.
Councilman Baker.
And this is maybe putting you too much on the spot, so hearing what you heard today, and I mean, would it give you pause to move forward with the recommendation that the city is giving us tonight to do further research, or are you comfortable with what you've done and say, you know what, despite what we've heard, this is the right bid?
Based on what I've heard tonight, if you agree, we would do more diligence and come back in 2 weeks. That we're prepared to do that.
One more question. It's usually Councilman Henderson's job. I'm not asking any of your questions if you notice, but do you have the means to do further due diligence? One of the things brought up was, postpone this for 2 weeks and have the city committee do more vetting. I mean, do you have a procedure in place that you feel comfortable that you can do that? Because I hate to
Mr. Mayor, I'd rather answer that question.
Okay, Mr. Miller.
Yes, we'd be ready, willing, and able to vet this more, but no, we do not have an existing procedure, but we would definitely develop one and be able to get back to you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And it seems wise to do that given the comments, to be honest.
Okay, thank you.
Seems like we could move this forward rather quickly if we agree to postpone and have it vetted rather than to continue this. Sounds to me like I think staff would like the opportunity to do that as well. So I'm going to move to postpone this item for 2 weeks.
Sorry.
for 2 weeks to allow staff to slow the process down as was asked and vet the issues that were raised this evening. So it's moved by the chair and supported by Councilman Pennington that we postpone this item for 2 weeks until the next city council meeting to allow staff time to vet the issues that were brought forward tonight. Any further discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Motion passes. Apologies to those that came forward tonight and took their evening away, but I think it's the right thing to do under the circumstances. So, we are going to move back to regular business. I-1, our board and committee appointments, mayoral appointments, and I have 3 this evening. I would like to appoint Charles Salgat and Joseph Vasallo to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority for the terms that expire 4/30/2021. I would like to appoint David Cannon to the Civil Service Commission, which is Act 78, for the term that expires 4/30/2024. I think I've been saying appoint, but I mean to nominate.
I understand.
If you could just
I got it.
clarify that, thank you. That's it for tonight.
Support.
Moved by the chair, supported by Councilman Baker, that we appoint those that I indicated to those nominated to those boards. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Motion passes. There are no city council nominations this evening. I-2 are mayoral appointments. There are no mayoral appointments this evening and/or,
You just did those.
pardon me?
You were just on I-2.
Okay, we're done. I-3 is a request for closed session. There is a request to Councilman Baker.
I'd like to move I-3, request for closed session, be it resolved that Troy City Council shall meet in closed session as permitted by MCL 15.268H, MCL 15.243G.
Support.
By Councilman Baker, supported by Councilwoman Hoderick, that Troy City Council shall meet in closed session as permitted by MCL 15.268H, MCL 15.243G. Discussion? The vote?
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Motion passes. I-4, acting city manager salary, with an introduction by Jeanette Menning, our Human Resources Director. Good Good evening, Jeanette.
Hi, Mayor and City Council. My purpose for being here this evening is to bring to your attention the fact that in the past, appointees to acting city manager have received a salary adjustment or other payments to recognize the additional responsibilities. We can easily make any salary changes retroactive to Mr. Miller's date of appointment if that's your direction and choosing.
Do you have a suggested pay?
In the documents in the agenda, I indicated the highlighted facts that I had. What I think is the most important fact is that, well, the two most important facts are that Mr. Miller is continuing to do both jobs. He's still Director of Economic and Community Development and is also acting city manager. And I think everyone could agree that these are unique and challenging circumstances and truly unprecedented for the city leadership. So the other facts that I've included is that Mr. Kishnick was earning just over $161,000 at the time of his separation. Mr. Miller is currently earning just over $127,000. And to start you at a starting point in my memo, I have placed $162,000. But I've left in your resolution that line blank.
I noticed that. Thank you. Councilman Pennington?
I would propose that we put in that amount of $162,000.
Support.
Moved by Councilman Pennington, supported by Councilman Hamilton, that the Troy City Council hereby approves a salary of $162,000 for Mark F. Miller beginning March 11, 2018 and effective until the end of his status as acting city manager. Further discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon?
I had it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Councilman Hamilton.
I just wanted to say that I know when we let the last city manager go, I voted no to appoint you, and that was only because I didn't know you at the time, and I didn't have enough information. And since you've taken this task on, all I've heard and experienced is you've done an incredible job in an extremely difficult situation. I just want to thank you, and I fully support you, and I support this motion.
The vote, Ms. Dixon?
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes. Motion passes. Hopefully that's okay, Mark.
Yes.
Thank you.
In transparency, that number was developed with Jeanette and myself.
Thank you. We've already addressed I-6. I-7 is the temporary extension of medical marijuana.
I-5.
We got your back.
We've got you.
Thank you for that support. I-5 is the bid.
Everybody's tired.
Yeah, the bid waiver and contract extension for golf management services, and once again, Elaine Bowe, Recreation Director, is here to.
Good evening again. Due to the recession in 2010, staff was asked to find ways to cut costs and had to look at the private sector to do so. In June of 2010, the City Council awarded a golf course management contract with Billy Casper Golf for one 4-year agreement with a 4-year extension. That contract expires June 15th of this year. To date, Billy Casper has successfully met the terms of agreements, and we've been had a great working relationship. They're really a nice bunch of staff that are there. Because of the contract expiring in the middle of the golf season, city management recommends waiving the bid process and extending the existing contract till December 31st of this year. Our plan is to bid this out unless City Council otherwise directs management to waive the bid process, and negotiate a contract with Billy Casper Golf. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions, but there was a pretty big document attached to this, and there also is an agreement from Billy Casper's staff saying that they agreed to those terms of extending the contract.
Thank you. Any questions for Councilman Henderson?
So this may not be a question, but it's just a statement. Billy Casper does a great job for us, and the city of Detroit just went through a situation where they're going to close 3 golf courses because they couldn't agree on another company to come in and run their 3 golf courses. In light of that, would it not be beneficial to extend their contract for 4 more years to run both our golf courses successfully, as they have in the past 8 years, but maybe move that date so that it expires in January, so that we can do this bid process without interrupting a golf season?
Just in some of the things I've heard from the staff, they're more than, we want to continue to work with them, but there are some changes that we want to make in their agreement. So what we're asking tonight is to extend the current agreement to December 18 so we can negotiate a new contract with them. Right?
So that would then potentially be a longer contract at that point. We could entertain exactly what Councilman Henderson is suggesting at that point.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Any new contract's not going to expire in June. Yeah.
Okay. Councilman Baker?
So just to clarify, the primary reason we're doing this tonight is because it doesn't make sense to have a contract end in the middle of the golf season.
Right.
It creates complications. I mean, obviously we've known since last summer, we talked a lot about this contract expiring. It's not so much that it's sneaking up on us, it's that it's not practical to do a bid in the middle of a golf season and potentially change.
Yeah, and we had to wait. We were working on this, and we had to wait because of the November ballot issue.
Sure.
I would also, I'm supportive of Billy Casper Golf. I mean, they've done a great job. I never hear any complaints about Billy Casper, which means I'll now get a flood of complaints. So sorry about that. But I definitely am supportive of continuing with them. Sometimes the right service is hard to find, and we were lucky to have a good one that's running our 2 golf courses very well, I believe. So I'm hopeful that we can add whatever we need in the contract, and they'll be agreeable to that. That'd be great.
I've seen them fix your divots. They do a good job.
City Attorney Bloom.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I just want to make sure that everybody's really clear on what we're voting on. Right here, what is in front of you tonight is only an agreement to extend it until December 31st. That's all that is in front of you right now. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't give us direction to try and negotiate an agreement, but before you do that, again, my very conservative advice is always you should go out for bids to see what's out there and to make sure that you're getting the very best for the dollar. Now, again, that doesn't mean that you can't take into account the good relationship and all of those factors, but right now what's in front of you is just an extension to December 31st. If you wanted to give us direction to try and negotiate an agreement with Billy Casper Golf and to waive the bid process, we are happy to hear we're happy to do what a majority of you tell us to do. And that would be at a later time.
Understood. Before I go back to Councilman Henderson, is there anyone else on council that wishes to speak? Councilman Henderson.
So this afternoon, we had the advantage of being in the agenda review, and Elaine had provided some information about phone calls that were made to other organizations, and the statement was made that we're not looking at apples and apples. So, I mean, it is awful difficult to try to get a good comparison in this particular field. It's just tough. So I think that lends itself to extending the contract, doing whatever we have to renegotiate whatever nuances that we need to, but I would recommend going that route.
Okay. I have a couple questions before we maybe get to that. When were you going to go out to bids? One of the concerns that I have is that one of the great things about Billy Casper Golf is that you can pretty much golf there whenever the temperature gets to whatever you feel is appropriate. I saw golfers out there yesterday golfing at 35 degrees. So the golf course is open all year round. This isn't just a spring, summer, and fall golf now with Billy Casper. So even though we would extend this to January or December 31st, 2018, there will be golfers golfing in January. So I have a concern, if we do go out to bid, it needs to be done rather quickly, I think, if you want to, you know, I know we're talking about less, you know, maybe a year from now, but Golf in Troy is now a 12-season. I golfed in February this year here in Troy.
Yeah.
I've golfed here in January, and like I said, I saw them out there yesterday. So, do you have a timetable?
I believe the date that Mary Beth and I discussed, do you want to come up? Because we did discuss that.
A project of this magnitude would take some time, much more time than a regular bid process. So I would at least guesstimate 90 days. So August, September, if we were to bid it out, an RFP would go out on the street probably, you know, like I said, August or September. To be able to bring it to council, you know, in time prior to the new December 31st contract expiration date.
Do you recall how many were on the last bid? How many bid for the last contract, like 8 years ago or 9 years ago?
I do not, I was not here at the time, so I don't know that.
Mr. Miller?
I do know that there were two.
There were two.
With one local from Royal Oak, a small. They ran one city Royal Oak golf course, and then Billy Casper, which is nationwide.
Yeah, I remember it was a no-brainer for Billy Casper back when we privatized the golf course and then we put it out to bid, and it was, you know, it's a very lengthy process, and I know it's a lot of work, and it just, although City Attorney Bloom, I'm with you under normal circumstances, but this one just seems, we don't have one problem with Billy Casper. We get nothing but great reports. Staff tells us that they work very well with them. You know, we're going to spend money and put this out, and we're likely going to get them in one small group again, and it just doesn't seem, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like we should do that under these circumstances, but we'll see how council feels about it. Councilman Hamilton, did you want to say something?
I was moving my arm, but no, I do have a
if you move your arm, I'm calling.
I know, but I'll just say that I just want to see what you propose, because it sounded, I'm interested. So. I've heard good things about Billy Casper too.
Does anybody else want to speak? Mayor Pro Tem Abraham.
I tend to be conservative in my approach with bid waivers. That's, as you may have noticed, that's where I ask the most questions prior to council meetings. And in general, I prefer them to be used very sparingly, and I understand why we may choose to do a bid waiver, but it's April 9th and the contract ends in December. It seems like there's ample time to understand if the landscape of who's out there now providing this service versus 8 years ago, it may be worthwhile to do it still. Billy Casper may still very much put together the best proposal in regards to the RFP and any new requirements, but I guess I'm a little hesitant to say 8 months before contract ends that we got to extend it for another 4 years. It's just my approach.
Thank you. Councilman Baker?
It's a valid point, and I get that. I'm not honestly overly familiar with the process, and I know it is a lot of work. I mean, I looked at for example, the tennis bids. I mean, they put a lot of work into that. And on the flip side of that, Billy Casper, I would think, has the resources to do that because they're such a big company. And I hear what Mayor Pro Tem Abraham is saying. I don't think we're necessarily talking about that at this moment. other than we're dealing with the bid waiver to extend it to December 31st, which I think you would agree is acceptable. So I think you're both right. We're all right on this one. It's tough. But if we're going to err on the side of caution, then it's probably best not to get into negotiations with them for another 4-year term without at least putting some feelers out there if there's a means to do that. Even though I hope that it's them, frankly. I think they do a great job. That ultimately, they're the ones.
Any other comments?
I agree. I agree with extending to December, and then I think this is a good discussion. And I think in this time where we're going through a lot of change, and people are probably scrutinizing us on a process level on things like this, that maybe we vote on this, extend to December, and then look to city management. It may make perfect sense to come back to us with a bid waiver. You might decide based on offline research that the bid waiver is appropriate, but I don't know that I'm comfortable making that decision tonight. I guess I want to err on the side of the caution that the city attorney, at least at the moment, I'm not ready to make that decision tonight, I guess.
Councilman Henderson.
I would feel more comfortable if we were to put if we're going to go out to bid and collect other information. I would feel more comfortable if Billy Casper would know by the end of this golf season, which maybe is October, whether or not they're going to continue on for another year, rather than, I know we're going to extend it through December, but just out of courtesy, I mean, there's a lot of people that are employed by Billy Casper that, I think we owe it to them, since they're doing such a good job, and the numbers are strong with, what they return to the city versus what we returned running it ourselves. So I would be in favor of that, as long as we can get that process done ASAP rather than wait till December to try to figure this out.
Yeah.
I think we have direction. I see some nodding, enough nodding that sounds like a direction from council to, sounds like we're going to do this and then as soon as possible do the bid process. Any other discussion on I-5? The vote, Ms. Dixon? Thank you. Thank you.
Just to be clear, the resolution that you had was to postpone it, correct? Or you're extending it?
Extend it to December.
Just as written.
Okay.
Did we not move that?
No, that's why I didn't catch it, because you didn't move or second it.
Time to go home. Councilman Henderson.
With the caveat that we act on an RFP immediately or as soon as.
That was a direction that was given to staff.
Yes.
Support.
By Councilman Henderson, supported by Councilman Pennington, that we approve I-5, the bid waiver and contract extension for golf management services as printed in the agenda packet. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Motion passes. Now we can go to I-7, the temporary extension of medical marijuana caregiver grow operation moratorium. City Attorney Bloom.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is a request to extend the caregiver moratorium for another 45 days. That will allow for council to consider a proposed resolution. And if you look in your agenda packets, we have placed a proposal for a new marijuana caregiver grow operation ordinance, and that appears in the items for follow-up. So that's K2A. So we're asking at this point in time to extend the moratorium another 45 days and allow for you to take action on that proposed ordinance or a proposed ordinance, and then also allow for the implementation of the new ordinance.
Thank you. Anyone wish to move the resolution? Councilman Henderson waved first.
Sorry. Yeah, I'd like to move I-7, temporary extension of medical marijuana caregiver grow operation moratorium as printed.
Support.
By Councilman Henderson, supported by Councilman Baker, that we approve I-7, the temporary extension of medical marijuana caregiver grow operation moratorium as printed in the agenda packet. Further discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Motion passes. Next is the consent agenda. Anyone on council wish to pull a consent agenda item? Councilman Hamilton.
Someone comment on J04B, so I'd like to remove that for discussion.
You want to take that out?
Yeah.
Any other items wish to be pulled? Councilman Henderson.
I'd like to move all items on the consent agenda with the exception of J4B, which was removed for discussion.
And will be considered after the consent agenda item? Right. Thank you.
Was that the one about the bathrooms at the park?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's the one.
Support.
Moved by Councilman Henderson, supported by Councilwoman Hoderick, that we approve all items on the consent agenda as presented with the exception of J4B, which will be considered after consent agenda items.
J4B is not,
Right, that's the one that he mentioned, but
it's not J4B.
Sure.
Yeah, it is.
Yep. It says State of Michigan Extended Chassis Purchasing Program.
Mm-mm.
Oh, I'm on. That's 2 weeks ago's agenda. Excuse me.
We have to start over?
2 weeks behind. It is late.
It's late. Any other discussion?
No.
The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
yes.
Motion passes. If you were here on a consent agenda item, except for J4B, they've all been approved so far. Councilman Hamilton, I'll defer to you for J4B.
Yeah, so the comment was a concern with the location of the bathroom at Beach Road Park. So is there any staff here? Maybe Mark can discuss that or anyone else?
Kurt Bobusi can come up.
Okay, oh, great, okay.
Hiding in the shadow.
Just a response to the comment that was made.
Evening, Mayor and Council. As Mr. Dory Goldberger suggested, is we have been in communication with email. Originally, it was designed to be placed near the rain garden because that's where the water was installed back in early 2000s. But I have no objection to looking at other locations and through email told Mr. Goldberger that we would work with the surrounding neighbors and do a best fit concerning the restroom and its location and taking into consideration where the utilities are along Beach Road.
And if we pass the resolution as it is, we can still direct you to do that, or we have to change the resolution?
The resolution does not, actually, in the resolution, it does not dictate where the restroom building is going. The resolution is just to purchase the restroom.
Understood.
Councilman Henderson.
So the numbers that are in the agenda for that item only cover the cost of the units, not necessarily the installation of the units?
It covers, these are prefabricated units, so the installation of these units is actually taking a crane and picking it up off a flatbed and setting it on the foundation. What's being proposed tonight does not include the foundation, so that'll likely be done with in-house staff. If not with done in-house staff, it'll likely be less than $10,000 to install that foundation, so you would not see that item before you. So, but that, again, that hasn't been determined. We can move that location.
Councilman Henderson.
And just to follow up to that, then, is the cost of what you said, the plumbing is already there for the unit proposed at Beach Road. If you had to relocate that to another more suitable area, would that add to the costs exponentially or not necessarily?
Not necessarily exponentially. The sewer is not there. The water tap, the water service, which is the cheaper of the two to install, that could be moved. It would be a higher cost to the overall project, not necessarily what you have in front of you today.
Councilman Hamilton, do you want to move the resolution at this point?
Oh, yeah. I'd like to move
J4B.
J4B, as printed.
Thank you.
Support.
By Councilman Hamilton, supported by Councilwoman Hoderick, that we approve J4B as printed in the agenda packet. Further discussion. The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Motion passes. Next on the agenda are memorandums and future council agenda items. K2 is a memorandum for the proposed medical marijuana caregiver grow operation license ordinance. Any questions on that? City Attorney Bloom.
May I just indicate that, again, this is a collaborative effort involving many departments, and I see that there are members that have stuck around here of the team and are still present. And so if there are amendments that any of you would like to see, or if there's any confusion, please let us know. The intent is to have this come back at the next city council meeting, absent contrary direction from city council.
Thank you. So if you have any questions or revisions, please contact City Attorney Bloom. Next is public comment for items not on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses. I see John Mayerneck, Troy resident, wishes to speak.
I have a headache. We're all stressed out, so I want to talk about puppies. No, just a little bit. Again, my name is John Marinick. I've lived in the city for 25 years, and I live by the White Barton Church. This is about the dog park. I don't know if you guys have ever been there, or if you have dogs and ever visited the dog park. I love it. It's an important and wonderful addition. I've always wanted one. I've had 5 dogs in my 25 years here. I currently have Abby, who's a nice yellow lab, 13 years old, and I have Odin, great Odin, who is a mix rescue from Detroit. So he's got a lot of energy, so we love that park. And I really look forward to the summer's improvements. I have one suggestion. I don't know if you realize it if you've ever been there, is that the dog park basically sits on a very low ground. It looks like somebody just scraped off all the dirt many years ago. And I know some topsoil was added so grass could grow, but for the most part, it's just sitting on clay. And the water just sits there. It's largely a mud bath. And you could probably just drive down Livernois. You can see the gleam of the sun as it just boom, 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 as you drive by, because there's so much water there. If we could please have some sort of emphasis, or I guess emphasis is a great word for it, or priority to somehow drain the park some way. Get some draining, add new topsoil, something like that. So I don't think it's going to be used very much if it's always underwater. I've seen where it rained in November, October, November, just after it was opened. And thank goodness it opened before it was raining, because I don't think anybody would have used it. I remember a puddle staying there for 7 days because it just sits there. So that's my suggestion. Look forward to using it, but I have to admit, right now I'm still using red oaks a lot more because they're dry. They actually have a hill on the very top, so dogs don't get wet. All right, thank you.
Thank you. It's an opportunity for City Council or City Administration to reply to public comment. Councilman Baker.
I don't know if this is for Kurt or for somebody, but is that something that can be at least reported to? I mean, is there an existing issue? I have to admit, I don't use the park myself.
We'll go through Mr. Miller first.
Yeah, I made a mental note, and we were going to give you a little report. And it probably won't even be on the agenda. It'll just be an update of what's going on.
Thank you.
Because it is in a floodplain. I mean,
right.
And the whole point that it was built was because we allowed floodplain on our property for the development. So we'll take a look at it.
Councilman Henderson.
One other thing, I used to have a lab that loved mud puddles, and going there, I can imagine having a dog splash around in that, and then having to put them in my car to get them back home. Is there any thought of putting maybe a rinse mechanism there for your dog so that you could, we're putting a bathroom there, and there's got to be running water, maybe a hose?
We'll look at that too.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Make sure you title the report, Drain the Swamp.
It's late.
It's late.
Next on the agenda are council referrals. There are none this evening. Next is council comments. Any comments from council this evening? Just to put to bed the report, City Attorney Bloom, you indicated you would probably get that to the council before it's released.
That is my intent, yes.
Okay.
I intend to do that as quickly as I can.
Thank you. Next are reports. Any comments on the reports in the agenda this evening? Councilwoman Hoderick.
It's so late and everybody probably just wants to go home, but I love the year-end reports that came in. I wanted to say I did look at them, read them. Maybe even next meeting, take a moment to reflect on some of the great work that you see there. The fire department annual report, I think the statistic was 99%. I don't know what the words were. 99% efficiency. I mean, that rocks. And just, the building department, recreation, all of that, it's just a lot of great work that goes on. Any of us could leave at any point and things would roll on. And I'm fully aware of that. Every time I look at this, all the terrific work that goes into this, and I appreciate it. I was especially pleased to see in the reports the item is G, the electronic message signs in Troy, and a proposal for going forward. And we don't want folks to think we have forgotten that we don't care, that we're not paying attention to it, and appreciate that update on that as well.
Any other comments on the report? Councilman Baker?
Just continue on P2G, the electronic signs. I guess I was a little unclear. Is this stating that that's what you will be doing, or you need direction from us to actually do that?
That's what we will be doing.
Will be doing.
But I do have an interesting finding. Kind of that evening, we all sort of assumed that we would have to hire an expert to create the standards. Well, those standards already exist. We just have to measure the light and apply the standards. And we can use our existing planning consultant and one of our engineering firms to do that, and within the budgets of both of those departments. So it actually worked out really well.
Sure.
Right. And I guess also so they're only testing the safety of the light emissions. Is that correct? I mean, because I have a feeling some of the people who've previously spoken will say, well, it's not just about the light, it's about the overall idea of them. I just want to make it clear that the testing that gets done for this is for the light and not for just the fact that they're there, correct? The size and the distraction in that respect? Is that fair?
No, the sign. We'll review the safety of the sign in total.
Okay. It's because the report speaks to the light test, so I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Any comments on the reports? Okay, we've already addressed Q1. There is a request for closed session, so we will be in recess and adjourn in the boardroom for a closed session. Thank you for coming this evening.